On the highest peak of the Shinwa continent, a cruel infernal glow painted the sky. Inside the candlelit chambers, incense burned thick in the air, barely masking the metallic stench of fresh blood. "Senior sister, I beg you, please let me go." The plea came out as a rasp, nearly drowned by the crackle of flames. Zhao Mu lay bound on the cold stone floor, his breath shallow and uneven, every inhale scraping his lungs raw. "That's a terrible way to wake up," his captor laughed. She had flowing crimson hair, a playful foxtail swaying lazily behind her, and a smile that belonged on a predator mid-hunt. Beauty and terror blended seamlessly on her face. Zia stared at her, dread pooling in his chest like ice water. "Husband," she purred sweetly, stepping closer. "Today is our big wedding day." She leaned down, her voice soft, silk-wrapped, and lethal. "Do you really have the heart to let your concubine stay all alone in this empty room?" To an outsider, it might have looked like an intimate domestic scene, a teasing wife and a shy husband, but Zia knew the truth. He was a transmigrator, someone dragged across worlds only to land in a living nightmare. This woman wasn't his wife. She was a lunatic demon cultivator who enjoyed role-playing different identities to satisfy her twisted whims, and he was her prisoner. The rope around his neck tightened as she tugged it playfully, a little leash binding him to her mood. She gestured towards several outfits laid out nearby, asking if she should change into something more festive. Zia's thoughts drifted back to how badly his second life had derailed. Just 1 year ago, everything had been perfect. He had transmigrated into the body of a noble son, blessed with talent and status. He even secured a marriage contract with a princess of the dynasty. He remembered riding through the capital on a white horse, crowds cheering, his future shining brighter than the sun. Then, right at the peak of his life, he was kidnapped by demons. What he first assumed was a simple ransom spiraled into something far worse. Becoming a prisoner was only the beginning. The real nightmare came when he learned the truth. His pure yang constitution, the very source of his talent, was considered the ultimate supplement for cultivating the 9 mystic art. Now he sat bound, his body faintly glowing with a burning aura, reduced to nothing more than a living battery for a demon woman's cultivation. In this sect, he wasn't a noble. He wasn't even a person. He was a servant disciple, a disposable resource. A violent convulsion tore through his body. Zia doubled over as far as his restraints allowed, coughing up a spray of brilliant crimson blood that splattered across the floor. His once prized pure yang energy was nearly exhausted. What gave him power now dragged him toward death. "I don't want to die yet." His life force flickered like the dying candles around them, fuel for her cultivation, entertainment for her perversions. Cold fingers closed around his throat above him. Her face twisted into ecstatic cruelty. Crimson hair spilled over her shoulders like fresh blood as she leaned close, her voice dropping to a whisper. "To die by my hands, junior brother, you should feel honored." She raised a small, translucent vial. Inside rested a solidified yang pill. It was meant to stimulate pure energy. In her hands, it was a death sentence, fuel for the final step of the 9 mystic art. She forced the pill into his mouth, her touch mockingly gentle. "This wife's cultivation is about to break through," she giggled, her expression flickering between doting lover and starving monster. "So don't be stingy with that last bit of pure yang energy you have, husband." Zia struggled as heat exploded through his veins, his teeth clenched, his body screaming. "I haven't even seen this world yet. Am I really going to be drained dry by a damn vixen like this?" His hand curled into a fist, nails biting into his palm until blood welled. "No, I'm not resigning myself to this. I will never give up." Suddenly, the world stuttered. A sharp, cold clarity cut through the haze of heat and pain. Blue lines of light assembled before his eyes, forming a translucent interface only he could see. Binding successful. Detected. Host received the system too late. Issuing compensation. Compensation reward confirmed. First return guaranteed. 10,000 times reward. The man stared at the glowing system sphere unfolding inside his consciousness. A full year of humiliation. A year of being hunted, drained, and treated like livestock. All of it had led to this moment. Cold blue light reflected in his eyes, washing away the lingering fear and replacing it with something sharper, something dangerous. Ambition edged with malice. System, the word echoed in his mind, trembling between disbelief and savage relief. A chance, a real chance to turn everything around. He lifted his gaze to his senior sister. She was still basking in her triumph, lost in the pleasure of dominance, completely unaware of the shift in his eyes. She didn't see the system prompt, didn't see the rule etched into his fate. Any act of giving will trigger a massive return. A slow, vicious smile curled at the corner of his lip. "I'll satisfy you right now, senior sister." His voice dropped an octave. Low, feral. He stopped resisting. Instead, he pulled her closer. If the system rewarded giving, then he would give her everything she demanded and let the 10,000 times return burn her world to ash. Tonight, he wouldn't be the sacrifice. Tonight, he would seize his destiny. The sun rose gently over the tranquil waters of the St. Yen Demon Sect, golden light rippling across the shore as if nothing monstrous had occurred within its wall. On the bed lay the protagonist, utterly spent, chest rising and falling as he stared blankly at the ceiling. Beside him, a woman with long crimson hair and the unmistakable tail of a spirit fox stretched lazily. She glanced at him with a teasing predatory smirk. "You didn't contribute much pure yang power," she said lightly, fastening her robes, "but your performance last night wasn't half bad." As she prepared to leave, she tossed one final remark over her shoulder. casual, chilling. It's a pity the other cultivation furnaces didn't survive. Still, if you manage to live, she smiled, I'll come back for more fun. The door closed. Silence returned. The man's exhausted expression vanished. In its place appeared something sharp, calculating. That was cold. A grin spread across his face as a translucent system interface flickered into existence. System awakening. The pure yang power she had attempted to drain erupted instead, triggering a violent surge within him. Golden energy burst from his skin. Glowing sigils raced across his muscles as power flooded his veins. Congratulations, host. You have reached the 10th layer of Qi refining, the Great Circle. A pillar of golden flame engulfed. In mere heartbeats, he had ascended from a disposable furnace to a peak Qi refiner. But the euphoria didn't last. He reigned in his aura instantly, binding the flames, cooling his breath. The Saint Yan Demon Sect was a viper's nest, crawling with monsters far stronger than him. If his advancement, or worse, his system, were exposed, death would be the least merciful out. Stepping into the courtyard, he gazed toward the horizon. He needed spirit stones, the foundation of all cultivation. Standing within the sect grounds, Zia frowned as he assessed his pitiful resource. Among servant disciples, gifting 3 or 4 spirit stones was already considered generous, but that wouldn't fuel his ambition. Then his eyes landed on Wang Chan, an outer disciple quietly meditating nearby. Zia remembered the small kindnesses Wang Chan had shown him when he first arrived. Time to repay that debt and test the system. If I give him the 200 spirit stones I've saved over the past, Zia calculated, the return should be insane. With a flick of his wrist, he tossed over a heavy pouch. Wang Chan's eyes flew open as the stones spilled out. 200 spirit stone. He stared at the sky in disbelief, then dropped to his knees. I, Wang Chan, have met a noble benefactor. At that moment, a blue interface ignited before Zia's eyes. Gave away 200 spirit stones, triggering 500 times return. Obtained 100,000 spirit stones. A towering pillar of golden light erupted around Zia, raining shimmering gems across the court. He stood at the center of the storm, laughter bubbling up as a manic grin split his face. 100,000, just the beginning. If he could trigger a 10,000 times return, millions would be within reach. Those who had humiliated him would repay their debts again and again. A thought struck. What if I give away the system-awarded stones? Will it trigger again? He tried. Nothing. The interface remained cold, silent. Zia exhaled slowly, blue light reflecting in his eyes. As expected, he muttered. No loopholes. Then, junior brother Zia. His body stiff. He turned to see a tall, formidable woman standing behind him, hand resting on the hilt of her sword. Her gaze was sharp, cold, and probing. White robes fluttered as she stepped closer. You, she said icily, actually haven't died yet. Luchai. Zia drew a slow breath. The game had only just begun. The sun hung high over the sect courtyard as Luchai approached. Clad in the crisp white robes of an outer disciple, she carried herself with a stern, disciplined grace that commanded attention without demanding it. The young man noticed her immediately. He straightened, clasped his hands, and inclined his head in a respectful bow. Greetings, senior sister Luchai, he said evenly. Luchai stopped before him, her gaze cool and methodical, as if dissecting him piece by piece. A translucent narrative prompt shimmered briefly in the air. Name, Luchai. Identity, outer disciple. Cultivation, 9 mystic art. The young man's thoughts drifted backward to when he had first entered the sect. Lost, weak, and utterly disposable. It was Luchai who had looked after him. She had been his rare island of stability in a nest of demons. That was before Chu Jiren issued her a warning. After that, her visits grew sparse, then stopped altogether. Breaking the silence, Luchai spoke. Your cultivation has improved significantly, she said. Your pure yang constitution is stronger than I expected. He smiled faintly. Senior sister flatters me. It was just luck. Her eyes narrowed. Enough nonsense. Before he could react, she seized his wrist. Her grip was firm, unyielding. He blinked in surprise. Chu Jiren will be entering seclusion in the coming days, Luchai said, resolve flashing through her eyes. While she's gone, you will properly help me cultivate. She didn't elaborate. Instead, she gestured downward. Spiritual energy surged. A massive glowing blue sword materialized beneath their feet, hovering inches above the stone tiles, essence drifting from its broad blade like mist. Get on. Moments later, the sword shot skyward. The sudden acceleration sent the young man lurching forward. Instinctively, he grabbed Luchai's waist to steady himself. Her body stiffened. A flush crept across her cheeks as wind tore past them. Senior sister, slow down, he called out, clinging on as the sword streaked toward the distant peak. Luchai glanced back, eyes sharp. It's only been a few months, she said, suspicion creeping into her voice. Yet your aura has changed completely. Tell me, did you gain benefits from that fox Chu Jiren? He sighed, shoulders slumping in a picture of believable exhaustion. Senior sister Chu only takes from me, he replied. How could I possibly gain anything? Her expression softened, but only slightly. Demons are not benevolent creatures, she warned. If you continue following her, you'll eventually be drained dry. Then her gaze hardened with ambition as she looked toward the horizon. This time I will break through to the core formation realm. When I do, I'll challenge her. She paused. If I win, you will follow me instead. The young man leaned closer than necessary, his voice dropping to a low murmur. Then I'll be relying on senior sister Luchai's care. She recoiled, startled. Color climbed up her neck. Why, you're too close, she snapped. As they descended toward the inner sanctum of the St. Yan Demon Sect, his mind raced. Follow her, what do they think I am? Some shared cultivation tool. They arrived at her private quarter. The open sky gave way to incense-scented air and polished wood. The mood shifted instantly. I'm on the verge of breaking through, Luchai said, turning to face him. If you help me succeed smoothly, I'll reward you with a vitality pill. He nodded. Understood. Sit, she ordered, already moving behind a screen that concealed the bathing chamber. I'm going to bathe. Steam filled the room as she settled into the wooden tub. Warm water lapped against her skin. No one will stop me this time, she murmured, determination softening her features. I definitely must. Must what? She shrieked softly, spinning around. Standing there already prepared, sleeves rolled, wearing an infuriatingly calm smile was her junior brother. Why did you suddenly come in? He stepped into the tub with maddening ease. Time is precious, he said lightly. Washing together is faster. The air changed. Not scandalous, dangerous. Then he said, settling beside her, presence steady and controlled, let us begin. A low rhythmic hum filled the chamber as cultivation commenced. Spiritual currents intertwined, flowing with eerie harmony. Luchai's breath hitched, her eyes fluttered shut. She felt the strength, the precision, the terrifying stability of his technique. Senior sister's 9 mystic art, he murmured, voice resonating through the steam, is truly remarkable. She leaned into the flow despite herself. And somewhere beneath the calm surface, something irreversible had begun. The junior brother leaned back against the tub's edge with a satisfied exhale. He glanced sideways at senior sister Luch. Her face flushed a deep, telling crimson. I really didn't expect senior sister Luchai, who cultivates the 9 mystic art, to actually be. That's enough, she cut in quickly, breath still uneven. You understand, there's no need to say it out loud. All right, he chuckled, raising both hands in mock surrender. The momentary levity faded as Luchai lowered her gaze, her expression turning solemn. I'm getting married next month, she said quietly. His relaxed demeanor vanished. That person's name is Long Tian. Long Tian, he repeated, brow knitting. He knew the name far too well, a supreme genius of the St. Yan Demon Sect, a heaven's pride who had reached the nascent soul realm before 30, a monster who had comprehended sword intent on his own. Panic flickered across the junior brother's face. If someone like that finds out I've put a green hat on him, wouldn't that be? Luchai reached out, pressing a steady palm against his chest. Relax, she said firmly. Long Tian damaged his meridians while cultivating an ancient sword manual. He's incomplete. She didn't elaborate further. She didn't need to. As long as I say nothing, she continued calmly, no one else will ever know. She leaned closer, her voice softening, warmth replacing the steel. Besides, she whispered, if I didn't truly like you, do you think I would give you my most precious thing? He met her gaze, voice dropping to a focused murmur. Senior sister, the air between them tight. A silent understanding passed. No promises, no illusions, only intent. You're on the verge of breaking through, he said quietly, resolve sharpening. Let's continue. Idiot, she breathed, though her actions betrayed no protest. Outside, their silhouettes overlapped against the lattice windows, 2 figures intertwined in the pursuit of power. Bamboo leaves rustled in the courtyard, anticipation hanging thick in the air. Inside, the intensity surged. Suddenly, glowing blue interfaces flared to life before his eyes. System, it's coming, he gasped. You were drained of all pure yang power. System activated. Red yang sacred body intensity significantly increased. Golden radiance surged through his muscles, reforging his foundation. The sensation was overwhelming. Pain and power braided together until a final chime rang out. Ding, congratulations, host. You have broken through to the foundation establishment state. He rose, golden flames licking across his body, eyes burning with confidence. In such a short time, he said, clenching his fists, I've already stepped into foundation establishment. At this pace, even Long Tian and the Long family don't scare me. He leaned over the woman, gently rousing her. That's right, he murmured, voice low. Senior sister, wake up. Where's my reward? She stirred with a faint, startled sound, caught between exhaustion and sleep. You're really too much, she whispered drowsily. I can't hold on anymore. Let me sleep a little. As she drifted off, she placed a slender jade vial in his hand. He uncorked it, eyes flickering with interest. 10 vitality pills, he noted. Senior sister Luchai is truly generous. He rolled the vial in his palm, a dark, satisfied smirk forming. But generosity alone wasn't the reward. Acknowledgement was, and still his ambition wasn't sated. Since I have to give pills away anyway, he thought, glancing at the exhausted woman, why look elsewhere when the perfect target is right? He pressed a second-grade vitality pill gently between her lips. Gave away 1 second-grade vitality, triggered 30 times return. Obtained 3rd-grade vitality, only 30 times, he muttered. That's disappointing. Undeterred, he continued. 9 chances remained. Another pill. This time, the system's resonance boomed. Triggered 3,000 times return. Golden light burst around her as the energy took hold. In his palm, a brilliant green glow condensed. Obtained 7th-grade marrow cleansing. He stared at the treasure floating before him, a sharp, triumphant smile spreading across his face. Now this was worth. The protagonist stood alone, a glowing green sphere resting quietly in his palm. A marrow cleansing pill, he murmured, eyes lighting up. This is the real deal. He understood its value instant. While it could stabilize one's foundation and nourish vitality like an origin-nurturing pill, that wasn't its true worth. Its real power lay elsewhere, in refining the marrow, reshaping the body, and raising a cultivator's root-bone aptitude potential, the ceiling that determined how far one could walk or fly. He clenched his fists slightly. Even with a pure yang constitution and enviable talent among mortals, he was still insignificant compared to the sect's favored geniuses. If he wanted to climb higher, if he wanted to stand where monsters stood, he needed to raise the upper limit of his existence. Without hesitation, he swallowed the pill. The effect was immediate. A violent surge of medicinal power detonated inside him, roaring through his veins like molten gold. Flames of radiant energy licked across his skin as he dropped into a meditative stance. Hurry, refine it, he gritted his teeth, forcing the raging power through his meridian. The process was brutal, agonizing but controlled. Layer by layer, impurity was stripped away. Then came the price. Dark residues seeped from his pores as his marrow was purified, carrying with it a stench so foul it could knock someone unconscious from nearby. Senior sister Lu Chai wrinkled her nose and waved the air away. "Why do you smell so terrible?" she snapped. "Go wash up now." He didn't argue. Moments later, hot water poured over him, washing away the black residue and the limits of his former self. As steam rose, her startled voice drifted in from outside. "You broke through to the Foundation establishment realm. Are origin-nurturing pills really this effective?" She stepped closer, eyes wide as she examined. This level of refinement wasn't normal. A simple breakthrough shouldn't cleanse the body to such an extent. "You took something else," she said slowly. Lu Chai leaned weakly against the wall, breath uneven, shock and exhaustion written across her face. You, she stammered. He stepped closer, expression composed. "Isn't this the result of dual cultivation with senior sister?" he asked lightly. Then with a faint, knowing smile he added, "Though it seems senior sister hasn't reached core formation yet." Her eyes widened. "It must be that junior brother didn't work hard enough," he continued calmly. "Allow me to help once more free of charge." "Are you insane?" she whispered hoarsely. "Do you have a death wish?" His tone didn't change. "This is so senior sister can break through sooner." Sometime later, the storm passed. The room fell quiet. Lu Chai lay resting, her aura finally stabilized, spirit calm at last. The young man straightened, adjusting his dark robes and fastening his belt. He glanced back once. "Take your time breaking through, senior sister. I'll head back first." As he turned, a translucent blue interface flickered into existence before his eye. "Ding. You were successfully drained of pure yang energy, triggering 10 times return. Red yang power slightly increased." He stepped out into the crisp sect air. Vitality surged through his limbs. Every step felt light, effortless. "So this is the Foundation establishment," he mused, a smirk curling his lip. "Once I get a flying sword, I'll ride the winds and roam the four seas." His path eventually led him toward the outer sect mark. The evening sun cast a warm golden glow over wooden stalls and tiled roof. Cultivators drifted through the streets, bargaining softly, spirit stones chiming as they changed hands. Trade, power, opportunity, and for him the next stage of ascent. He stopped before a vendor stall where several long wooden cases were neatly arranged, each etched with the ancient character for sword. The vendor sensed it immediately, the change in the young man's aura. His attitude shifted at once. Bowing slightly, he presented a small, polished case with both hands. "Fellow Taoist is generous," the vendor said. "Respect. Thank you for your patronage." Zia opened the case. Inside lay the star-guarding slayer, a flying sword forged from extraterrestrial meteoric iron, its blade humming softly with an azure glow. Star vortex formations were etched along its surface, an array designed to siphon cosmic energy to endlessly sharpen its edge. He weighed it in his palm, a faint smile tugging at his lip. 30,000 spirit stone. Expensive. But what truly intrigued him was the return he'd get the day he decided to give it away. Then, "Pretty boy, I finally caught you." The coarse voice shattered the moment. Zia turned his head lazily. Towering behind him was a massive horned figure, muscles like iron plates, breath steaming with heat. Behind him stood several lackeys spreading out subtly, sealing off escape routes. New AI, an outer disciple infamous for brute strength, and for his obsessive fixation on senior sister Chu Jier, a Foundation establishment cultivator who had inherited the Ox demon bloodline. In raw power alone, he surpassed most human cultivators of the same realm. New Ai's face twisted into a snarl. "I heard you met senior sister Chu again," he growled. "Is it true?" He closed the distance in one step and seized Zia by the collar. His grip felt like a steel vice. Zia didn't resist. "So what if I did?" he replied calmly. The words landed like a slap. "You," New AI roared, his fist erupting in violent crimson flames. The air distorted from the heat as his killing intent exploded outward. "Then die for me," he lunged. The fist descended like a falling mountain, but Zia moved. With a single sharp motion, he caught the flaming fist bare-handed. Boom! The shockwave blasted dust and debris into the air, but Zia didn't move an inch. His feet remained planted, his expression tranquil. "Sorry," Zia said lightly, his smile widening just enough to be insulting. "I still want to live a little longer. I haven't finished having fun with senior sister Chu." New Ai's eyes widened. The rage froze, replaced by disbelief. You broke through to the Foundation establishment realm too." He staggered back, aura surging violently. Crimson light erupted from his body as his Ox demon bloodline was pushed to its limit. Don't think that just because you broke through you're worthy of standing in the same breath as me. The air crackled. Zia watched calmly, tracking every movement, every desperate swing. Your strength isn't bad, he remarked casually, but your speed is lacking. Shut up, new AI roared. He unleashed a barrage of crimson strikes, each blow heavy enough to shatter stone. But Zia had already read the rhythm. Golden light burst from his body. Enough, he said. The farce ends. One decisive strike sent new AI flying, his massive frame crashing into the dirt as blood sprayed from his mouth. Silence fell. The surrounding lackeys stared in horror. That kid, when did he become this strong? As new AI lay broken, his subordinates barely tried to salvage the situation. You can't touch him. His family has influence in the sect. Zia paused. A faint, dangerous smile curved his lip. Oh, he said mildly. You just reminded. With a flick of his wrist, a second-grade flying sword appeared in his hand, glowing cold blue. He didn't strike. Instead, he tossed it onto the ground before the fallen bully. Clang. This flying sword is worth 30,000 spirit stones, Zia said casually. Using it as medical compensation should be enough. The system interface flickered before his eyes. Gave away 1 second-grade flying sword, triggering 1,000 times return. The reward was instantly calculated. An even more terrifying high-grade sword quietly deposited into his private inventory. Zia didn't even blink. So, he thought at that moment, 2 figures leapt from the rooftop. Purple aura flared as hidden attackers lunged for his back. Weapons aimed for his vitals. Zia didn't turn around. Reckless fools, he sighed. His aura detonated. A violent shock wave of blue light erupted outward. Don't blame me for being ruthless. A blinding arc of energy swept across the street. The attackers were disarmed instantly, their weapons clattering away as they crashed to the ground, clutching their chests in agony. Before the crowd could even breathe, a new presence stepped forward, a woman with long flowing hair and a piercing gaze. She surveyed the scene coldly, eyes filled with disdain as she looked at the groaning attacker. And you people still dare to file a complaint first, she snapped. I saw everything, you attacked first. Her voice carried authority. The situation had just escalated. The cool evening air of the sect town was thick with tension as Zia Mu stood his ground. A sharp, scolding voice cut through the murmurs of the crowd. Mu Ling strode toward him, her expression fierce and uncompromising, light blue robes snapping in the breeze. Zia Mu, she snapped, jabbing a finger at his chest. Weren't you a little too careless? Her presence was oppressive, not loud but heavy, the kind that made people straighten their backs without realizing why. I told you earlier, she continued coldly. When dealing with enemies, you don't just cut the weeds, you dig out the roots. Behind them, 2 thugs with curved horns jutting from their foreheads snorted in irritation. They hadn't realized yet who they were facing and were still drunk on borrowed courage. What kind of thing are you, woman? Both of them barked, faces twisted in sneer. Do you even know who our boss is? Mu Ling slowly turned her gaze toward them. Her eyes narrowed, sharp, predatory, merciless. My name is Mu Ling, she said calmly, her voice dropping to a dangerous hush. Do you have a problem with that? The name hit them like a thunderclap. Their arrogance evaporated instantly. One stammered, knees trembling. The inner sect senior sister. The other went pale. Run, don't let her remember our faces. Boss Niu made us do it, he blurted desperately. It has nothing to do with us. Without another word, the 2 cowards turned and fled into the shadows, tripping over themselves in their panic. Mu Ling watched them go, lips curling with undisguised contempt. A bunch of trash. Then she turned back to Zia Mu. She stepped closer, too close, close enough that he could feel her breath. A faint pink flush crept across her cheeks, but the fire in her eyes didn't soften. And you, she said, voice lower now firmer. What about you? Zia Mu blinked. Senior sister. She leaned in even closer, eyes blazing. Did you forget what I told you? He froze. If anything happens in the future, she continued, just say my name. Later, amidst the bustling crowd, Zia Mu stood quietly, the weight in his chest heavier than the sword at his side. Beside him, Mu Ling leaned in again, her gaze fixed on him with an intensity that bordered on obsession. Good thing I happened to be here this time, she murmured, cheeks faintly pink. Otherwise, if you died, who would I marry? Zia Mu offered a tired, helpless smile. Ever since he joined the sect, this woman had been watching him like prey. And now seeing her so clearly, the truth struck him with unsettling clarity. She's not after my pure yang physique. She's not covering some hidden treasure. She just wants my face. That's both funny and terrifying. The realization almost scared him more than her sword. In her hand, that blade was still stained with blood. To the outside world, Mu Ling of the Saint Yan Demon Sect was a ruthless, cold-blooded cultivator. Those who had seen her in battle, eyes glowing crimson, blade drinking lives, would never imagine this side of her. She reached out and pinched his cheek. Luchin let out an involuntary laugh. It's not that easy for me to die, he said, trying to recover his dignity. She didn't seem to hear him. Her expression turned deadly serious. My future husband cannot be in danger. Without warning, she grabbed his hand. Come with me. Before he could protest, she leaped into the air. Power surged around them as they rose, soaring above the rooftops. There was no flying sword beneath their feet, no spiritual artifact. They were flying purely on internal energy. Luchin's eyes widened as the wind roared past them, flying without a sword. That's something only core formation cultivators can do. He stared at the girl pulling him through the sky, her silhouette wrapped in a blazing crimson aura, moving with effortless control. Just what level is this woman? The mystery of Mu Ling only deepened with every mile. Soon the cool night air of the St. Yan Demon Sect's core holy land hummed around. Dense spiritual energy filled the space, glowing reddish-orange as it flowed through the pathway. Luchan flexed his fingers, watching golden sparks dance across his skin. This spiritual density, he murmured, so rich. Mu Ling stopped in front of a modest wooden house, its interior glowing warmly. This is the core holy land, she said simply. Then she turned, opened the door and smiled. Come inside with me. This is my home. Luchan followed her inside, brows knitting slightly as his eyes swept the room. Is she a personal disciple? He wondered. The space was cozy and unexpectedly refined, wooden shelves lined with books, faint incense lingering in the air, warm and lived in rather than grand. You live here? He asked. When I manage to steal some leisure time, she replied casually. I come here to read and sleep. Then with a faint smile, she added, though I don't come off. Without warning, she let out a playful heave and flopped onto the low bed. Her light blue robes fluttered as she sprawled out comfortably, turning her head to look at him with a teasing grin. Why are you still standing there like an idiot? She said lazily. Come over here already. Luchan stayed exactly where he was. His expression tightened, a mix of caution and very real self-awareness. Don't try anything, he warned, voice strained. My self-control is very limited. She shot upright instantly, her face turning a vivid shade of pink. You shameless playboy, she snapped, pointing at it. What disgusting thoughts are you having? Before he could respond, she grabbed 2 leather-bound manuals and shoved them into his hand. Here, Luchan froze when he read the title. True Chapter of Sword Control. Mystic Heart Sword Art. His eyes widened. How did you know I wanted to cultivate sword control? He asked, genuinely stunned. She smirked, clearly pleased with herself. HMP8. You just broke through to Foundation Establishment and immediately ran to the market to buy a flying sword. Anyone with half a brain could guess you want to learn sword control. Then she produced a slender, ornate case. Oh, right, and this too. She opened it, revealing a blade shimmering with icy brilliance. I'm giving you this flying sword. 6th grade cold attribute, frost foil. Luchan accepted it, instantly feeling the pure surging energy within the blade. She studied him closely, her voice softening. You have intense blazing energy inside you, she said. This sword is perfect for suppressing your evil fire. Might stop you from thinking about those things all day. Luchan smiled awkwardly but sincerely. You're really thoughtful. Good. She stood and turned toward the door. You'll stay here and cultivate sword control for a few days. I'll handle everything else. She paused, then added casually. Since you've already reached Foundation Establishment, you don't need to be a servant disciple anymore. I'll have your token updated to outer sect level. He frowned, confusion finally winning out. Who exactly are you? He asked, exhaustion creeping into his voice. She stopped in the doorway, leaning against the frame. Confident, playful smile curved her lips. The person you'll marry sooner or later. Then she stepped out. Thud. The door closed decisively behind her. Luchan stared at it for a long moment, then shook his head. This little girl really knows how to flirt, he muttered with a wry smile. Still, distractions were dangerous. Forget it. Cultivating sword control comes first. He sat cross-legged, talismans glowing around him as golden energy swirled through the room. He focused hard, forcing himself through the technique. Minutes passed, then hours. Finally, thump, he collapsed onto his back, panting. Huff, huff. Didn't I use a marrow cleansing pill to improve my apt? He groaned, staring at the ceiling. Then why is sword control still so damn hard? Sat up, rubbing his chin. The pill had improved his physical potential, but his comprehension was still trash. What do I do now? He muttered. I have the system, but if my comprehension is this bad, I'll cry myself to death before I get anywhere. That was when his eyes landed on a small white-horned demon beast nearby, casually chewing grass like it didn't have a care in the world. A spark lit up in his mind. Even teaching a beast counts as giving knowledge in the system's eyes. That's clever. Mischievous, slightly predatory grin spread across his face. Hey little guy, he said sweetly. You look bored. Before the beast could react, Luchan lunged forward and grabbed it by the horn. How about I teach you something? The demon beast's eyes widened in pure terror. Listen carefully, Luchan said seriously. 1 times 5 equals 5. 3 times 4 equals 12. 4 times 5 equals 20. The beast's brain visibly short-circuited. At that moment, a digital interface flashed into existence. Ding, you have enlightened a demon beast. Imparted knowledge triggered a 100 times return. Host comprehension has increased significantly. A sharp clarity washed over Luchan's mind. The once confusing pathways of sword control suddenly felt obvious. He clenched his fist, eyes blazing with triumph. It actually worked. Golden inscriptions pulsed softly around Luchan as he sat in a meditative trance, ancient symbols humming with restrained power. For the first time, the once cryptic characters of high-level martial arts no longer mocked him with obscurity. The fog in his mind had lifted. He opened his eyes. A sharp amber glint flashed within them. Not bad, he muttered. He extended a hand. A spectral sword materialized in midair, solidifying from pure intent, glowing obediently as it hovered at his command. Kung fu that once felt unreadable, he said quietly, watching the blade tremble with resonance. I can comprehend it instantly now. Yet his expression didn't soften for long. Dissatisfaction crept in. His aptitude had already reached a level others would kneel for, but Luchan knew better. In this world, good enough was just another way to die slowly. For a transmigrator, mediocrity was a death sentence. He needed to be peerless. his gaze shifted. Nearby, a small horned spirit beast crouched awkwardly, staring at him with wide, curious eyes. A mischievous, borderline sinister smile curved across Luchen's face. "Oh," he said lightly, "you look eager to learn." Before the creature could flee, he grabbed it by the scruff. "Very well, this teacher will now introduce you to a new subject," he announced solemnly. "Geometry and calculus." Moments later, Lucian stood before a chalkboard that definitely did not belong in this world. Strange symbols, formulas, and diagrams filled its surface. Concepts so alien they might as well have been divine script. The spirit beast trembled as Lucian lectured enthusiastically. "Observe. If this angle intersects here, no, don't faint. Then the theorem follows. Ding. You taught calculus knowledge. Triggered 100 times return. Comprehension drastically improved." Lucian felt his mind expand violently, thoughts snapping into place as if the universe itself had lowered its guard. He inhaled sharply and then froze. A glowing red warning flashed across his internal interface. "Warning, host's current comprehension has reached the upper limit for this cultivation realm. Further improvement is impossible." So comprehension has a cap too, he thought. Still, he wasn't disappointed. With this level of mental clarity, the sect library was no longer a treasure vault. It was an instruction manual. He swept through the archives like a storm. He didn't study techniques. He devoured them, Vajra fist. His arm ignited with blinding metallic radiance. Crimson wind thunder art. A bolt of red lightning tore through the air, blasting into the courtyard and sending the spirit beast shrieking for cover. 3 talents arts, 8 divination techniques, several auxiliary secret methods. Each was mastered in heartbeats. Yet when his eyes drifted toward the stacks of yellow rank scrolls, disdain crept in. Unrated yellow rank techniques, he thought flat. Too crude for the current. Still, he gathered. "I've memorized everything anyway," he mused. "Once I leave, I can rewrite them and pass them on to others." A slow smile formed. That should trigger an obscene amount of return rewards. As he prepared to leave the pavilion, the small horned spirit beast suddenly trotted up to him, squeaking frantically. It held something in its mouth, a weathered, carved bone. Lucian paused. He crouched and patted the creature's head. "You're giving this to me." The beast squeezed its eyes shut happily. "Thanks," Lucian said dryly. "I'll make soup later." The instant his fingers touched the bone, boom, violet-purple energy erupted, flooding the room with ghostly light. Lucian's pupils shrank. Chaos. Shimmering art. Before he could react, his system interface blazed to life. Detected technique. Chaos shimmering art. Automatic learning initiated. The knowledge slammed into his mind like a celestial hammer. Gah! Lucian collapsed to his knees, clutching his head as searing pain tore through his skull. His vision spun. Blood sprayed across the floorboards. The spirit beast cried out anxiously, circling. "Damn it," Lucian gasped, breath rag. "My comprehension already hit the foundation establishment limit, and I still can't digest this." He stared at the bone lying on the floor, trembling. "Earth rank," he muttered hoarsely. "Or heaven rank." The door suddenly creaked open. A woman in pale blue robes rushed in, her face drained of color. "Zhao Mu," she cried. "What happened to you?" Seeing his condition, she didn't hesitate. She stepped forward at once, slipping an arm behind his back to support him before he could even protest. "That's a real one right there. This is my fault," she said softly, guilt flickering across her face. "I shouldn't have let you touch such a difficult technique so early." "That's not," Zhao Mu tried to explain. She cut him off gently, already shaking her head. "Cultivation cannot be rushed for short-term gains. That path only leads to broken foundations or broken bodies." She pulled a lacquered food box closer and opened it with practiced ease. Steam rose into the air, fragrant and warm. "I prepared food," she said matter-of-factly. "We'll eat first." She lifted a spoon and brought it toward his lips. "I'll feed you. Come say ah." Zhao Mu watched her from beneath lowered lashes, a faint knowing smile tugging at his mouth. While she fussed over him, he casually reached for the carved bone and held it out. "I'll give this technique to you," he said lightly. "See if it's useful." She blinked, startled, instinctively accepting the glowing relic. "Where did you even get this?" she asked. "A little beast handed it to me," he replied lazily, leaning back. "I can't cultivate it anyway. Might as well give it to you." The moment her fingers closed around the purple vein bone, ding. "You gifted an earth rank technique. Chaos shimmering art. Triggered 80 times return." Zhao Mu's pupils contract. The air around him began to hum, invisible pressure rippling outward as something far more terrifying took shape inside his consciousness. "It's here," he thought calmly. "Reward generate. Earth rank high-grade technique. Pure yang shimmering art." Golden light exploded behind his eyes as the system interface flared. Ding! Pure yang shimmering art detect. Perfectly compatible with host's red yang sacred body. Immediate empowerment available. Without hesitation, Zhao Mu mentally slapped the glowing yes icon. "We'll talk later," he decided firmly. "Right now I live." Across from him, the woman watched closely, unease creeping into her expression. She clutched the purple bone to her chest, brows knitting together. "No idea how long this empowerment will take," Zhao Mu thought. "Can't let my darling get suspicious." She suddenly snapped, her voice sharp with anger. "That damn mutt stole my technique again," she hissed. "Nearly got my future husband killed." She turned back to Zhao Mu, her tone shifting instantly to stern and protect. "Fortunately, you didn't force the cultivation," she said seriously. "You have a pure yang constitution." While the chaos shimmering art carries chaotic attributes, they clash violently. She stepped closer, eyes intent. If you had forced it, your meridians would have exploded. Instant death. Cold sweat slid down Zhao Mu's spine. So that's it, not lack of comprehension. Constitution conflict. Seeing the realization dawn in his eyes, her expression softened. She leaned in, her voice turning soothing again. Your constitution is special. Techniques suitable for you are extremely rare. I'll need time to collect. Her hand rested warmly against his shoulder. Before that, cultivate foundational techniques, accumulate experience. That's the king's path. Then she leaned even closer, her gaze lingering with playful calculation. Isn't my intention obvious? She purred. She tilted his chin up, fingers light and confident. Zhao Mu, just yield to me. She painted him a future with effortless luxury, fine food, fiery wine, unquestioned safety within the Saint Yen Demon Sect. As long as you become Dao companions with, she whispered, breath warm against his ear, no one will dare touch even a single hair on your head. Zhao Mu opened his mouth to respond. Nonsense. The words struck like heavenly judgment. A thunderous roar split the air as a pillar of purple light crashed through the structure. The pressure slammed Zhao Mu into the ground, pinning him flat as if the sky itself had descended. Gah, he gasped, bones screaming under the overwhelming aura. The woman's teasing confidence vanished instantly, her face drained of color as she stared at the devastation. Such terrifying pressure, she whispered. Who? Her eyes widened in sudden recognition. Master, she cried, why are you here? A figure descended slowly from the sky, wreathed in violent purple flames. Her presence was cold, domineering, absolute. The master's gaze locked onto her disciple, sharp and merciless. What? The woman stammered, frozen. The master hovered above them, lips curling with icy sarcasm. Does my presence, she asked coldly, ruin the taste of your little good deed? The oppressive weight of spiritual pressure crushed the clearing like a tangible force, bending the air and twisting the branches overhead. The empress appeared, her robes a flowing tapestry of white and lavender, each fold radiating a chilling authority that made even the seasoned disciples falter. Su Ling's head bowed low, trembling under the sheer intensity of her master's presence. Disciple dares not, she whispered, her voice barely audible over the crackling, suffocating energy. The empress's eyes narrowed, sharp as poisoned blades. Su Ling, she intoned, her voice a venomous mix of disappointment and command. You are the disciple this teacher values most. I raised you to inherit the position of sect emperor. Her gaze swept to the disheveled man crouched beside Su Ling. But look at you. Not only do you neglect proper cultivation, you hide a servant disciple in your residence to flirt and play around. The man's teeth clenched, a volatile purple aura spiraling around him. The sect empress is Su Ling's master, he realized, sweat beading on his temple. No wonder she carries such confidence. Master, please forgive me, Su Ling cried, throwing herself to the ground, body trembling in guilt. Disciple knows her mistake. The empress regarded her silently, unmoved, then exhaled sharp. Since you know your mistake, then this teacher will give you one chance. With a flick of her wrist, a translucent blade appeared in her hand, shimmering with lethal intent. Kill this servant disciple with your own hands. Sever your roots of affection. Then follow me back to Purple Cloud Peak for 30 years of closed-door cultivation. Su Ling stared at the blade embedded in the dirt before her, her heart hammering. The ultimatum was clear, her future or the man beside her. But instead of lifting the sword, she looked up, eyes brimming with tears, voice trembling yet resolute. This has nothing to do with Zia. If I kill him, my Dao heart will be affected. I fear my cultivation will stall forever. Are you threatening me? The empress hissed, purple energy erupting outward like a storm. The blast slammed into Su Ling and Zhao Mu, pinning them mercilessly to the ground. Zhao Mu struggled beneath the crushing force, eyes wide with alarm. Damn it, is the empress really trying to kill us both in one strike? Master, Su Ling gasped, her strength ebbing. Seeing the woman he cared for on the edge of collapse, Zhao Mu's internal energy snapped. Take my spiritual power, he roared, surging forward and catching Su Ling in his arm. Golden light erupted through the suffocating purple haze, twisting and tearing the oppressive energy aside. The empress froze, shock softening the fury in her expression. There really was a secret. If I'm not mistaken, he must have awakened the Six Paths sacred body. Before her eyes, the lowly servant disciple transformed. Zhao Mu rose tall, his silhouette framed by a towering phantom of golden energy, muscles and aura amplified into a living storm. The latent power he wielded filled the clearing, a tidal wave that shifted the confrontation entirely. The empress could only stare, realization dawning. This man, dismissed as a distraction, held the strength to shake the foundations of the world. Su Ling's gaze lingered on Zhao Mu, initial shock softening into a calculated, almost predatory curiosity. You rascal, she murmured, sharpness returning to her voice. If I had known you possessed the Six Paths sacred body earlier, I would have tied you to the bed. Zhao Mu's expression went blank. A single word escaped. Huh, the empress coughed, ragged and irritated. Ahem, master. She muttered, ignoring his confusion, eyes fixed once more on the man. Master, please let Zia go, Su Ling pleaded again. Fine, forget it, the empress said at last, the edge in her voice softening slightly. For Su Ling's sake, today I will spare your life for now. With a sweep of her hand, a vortex of violet spiritual energy swirled around them, lifting Su Ling and Zhao Mu off the ground. Return to the outer sect to cultivate until you break through to the nascent soul realm. Do not come looking for Su Ling. In a flash of light, they vanished, leaving behind only the rustle of leaves and the lingering scent of ozone. Quiet reminder of the storm that had just passed. Zhao Mu stood alone in the silence, hand pressed against his chest as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving a raw ache in its wake. Such terrifying power, he thought, brow furrowed. If the Empress truly wanted me dead, one thought would have been enough. A surge of frustration and determination boiled in his chest. Strength. I need to be even stronger. He retreated to his servant quarters, the Empress's ultimatum pressing down like a physical weight. Sitting cross-legged on the wooden floor, the room's quiet was a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded in the clearing. Finally, time to concentrate, he whispered to the empty space. I can't afford to waste a single moment. My goals are far from reached. System begin improvement, he commanded mentally. A translucent blue interface shimmered to life before him, floating with a gentle hum. Zhao Mu drew in a slow, steadying breath, hands poised. Self-paced cultivation speed. Is this the effect of studying the fire pond shimmering art and the six paths sacred body? He murmured. Suddenly, a red warning icon flashed sharply on the screen. Detected surrounding heaven and earth's spiritual energy insufficient for the next state. Request additional input. Zhao Mu didn't hesitate. Yes. His finger tapped the holographic interface. Instantly, the room flooded with a radiant glow as spirit stones, thousands of them, hovered shimmering with brilliant blue light. The stones cracked and dissolved, releasing torrents of multicolored spiritual essence that spiraled into the system. Now comes the improvement, he declared, his body igniting with a fierce golden aura, muscles and meridians vibrating as the next stage of his transformation surged through him. The moon hung low over the sect as Zhao Mu sat in a meditative trance, his form bathed in flickering golden flame. The breakthrough was brutal. Each pulse of power threaded through his body, reshaping. By the time he opened his eyes and exhaled the heavy, turbulent air of cultivation, the cost became painfully clear. 70,000 spirit stones burned in a single night just to reach the third layer of the foundation establishment stage. Powerful, yes, but financially drained. That's expensive. The next morning, stepping out of his quarters, Zhao Mu stretched, flexing stiff muscles, mind already ticking. Next, I need a way to make money, he muttered, thinking of his empty pockets. His thoughts were abruptly interrupted by a group of disciples blocking his path. At the center stood a hulking man, long blonde hair cascading over broad shoulders, confidence radiating like heat. Zhao Mu, the man called, voice dripping with false camaraderie. I heard senior sister Chu gave you quite a few benefits. Planning to show some appreciation to us, brother. Zhao Mu's eyes swept over him coolly. The man who gang was infamous, a bully who lorded over weaker disciples, a self-proclaimed tiger among the low ranks. Reputation preceded him, a servant disciple who had just clawed his way to the 9th level of chi refinement. Ruthless and entitled. You sure spent a lot of spirit stones, huh? Zhao Mu countered calmly. Hu Gang's face twisted in rage. Who do you think you're talking to, brat? With a roar, he lunged, fist glowing, phantom tiger claws flickering around the strike. To Hu Gang, Zhao Mu seemed like a stationary target, but to Zhao Mu the attack was slow, sluggish. Too slow, he whispered. Before Hu Gang could register the movement, Zhao Mu was beside him. Lightning fast, precise, he delivered a crushing blow that sent the larger man staggering. Blood sprayed across the stone floor as Hu Gang stumbled back, caught by his lackey. Brother Hu Gang, are you okay? They cried, faces pale, panic in their eyes. Hu Gang's own eyes widened, disbelief etched into his features. Zhao Mu stood tall, a faint, playful smile tugging at his lips, a subtle heat radiating from his body. Is it that obvious? He asked casually, voice smooth and light. Hu Gang was now completely enraged. He struggled to stop the blood flowing from his mouth and in a furious voice shouted at his two companions, telling them not to just stand there staring. He ordered them to attack together. Hearing Hu Gang's command, both of them nodded in agreement. A green-colored aura burst out from their bodies, their eyes turning blood red. Without hesitation, the two of them charged straight toward Zhao Mu, hurling curses at him as they rushed in. Zhao Mu, however, remained standing calmly in the same spot, watching them approach without even a hint of panic. As the two got closer and closer, Zhao Mu casually stepped back. In their minds, they were convinced that the two of them together would definitely defeat Zhao Mu. A distance, several disciples were watching the fight. One female disciple spoke in disbelief, saying she simply could not accept it. How could Zhao Mu have actually broken through to the foundation establishment realm so quickly? Another female disciple responded saying that even if he had just broken through to foundation established, fighting so many chi refining stage cultivators at the same time was definitely not an easy task. Still, she admitted it was impressive. Nearby, a male disciple warned Zhao Mu to be careful. At that moment, Zhao Mu took a deep breath. As he inhaled, golden-colored energy flowed into his body. He raised his hand and pointed forward. From two of his fingers, red-colored energy began to gather. When he swung his fingers like a sword, a sharp beam of energy shot out, blasting the two attackers away and sending them flying. They crashed to the ground in the distance, and Zhao Mu coldly told them to get lost. But suddenly from behind, Hu Gang made his move. He had completely transformed into his tiger form. With a roar, he launched a sneak attack at Zhao Mu from the back, cursing him loudly. Yet Zhao Mu remained completely unbothered. He calmly looked at his clenched fist. Smoke rose from it. As Hu Gang closed in, overflowing with rage in his tiger form, Zhao Mu was still chilling. Just as Hu Gang's claw was about to reach Zhao Mu's face, Zhao Mu suddenly turned around. A confident smile appeared on his face. An eerie confidence radiated from him as he tightened his fist. Red energy became clearly visible around it. In the next instant, Zhao Mu threw a punch straight at Hu Gang. Boom. Hu Gang was sent flying, crashing hard into the ground. Blood poured from his mouth as he landed directly on top of his fallen companion. Even then, Hu Gang struggled back to his feet. He was now furious beyond belief. He threatened Zhao Mu, telling him to just wait. He still believed he could defeat him, but in the very next moment, Zhao Mu appeared directly above Hu Gang's head. He stepped down on Hu Gang's head and released his pressure. The pressure was so terrifying that Hu Gang's head was forced down into his own chest. At this moment, Zhao Mu looked like a complete demon. He coldly told Hu Gang to shut up. After Hu Gang was utterly crushed, a crowd quickly gathered around Zhao Mu. People began cheering for him, shouting his name and praising him loudly. They said that Hu Gang had bullied and oppressed them for a long time, and today, Zhao Mu had finally taken revenge on their behalf. They were overjoyed. These so-called tiger demons who used their strength and size to rule over everyone had finally been kicked in the ass by Zhao Mu. That must feel satisfying for them. Hearing all the praise, Zhao Mu smiled and laughed as well. He raised his hand, signaling everyone to calm down. Then from Hu Gang's fallen body, he took out his storage bag. Zhao Mu announced that all the spirit stones Hu Gang had robbed from others would now be returned to their original owner. The moment the crowd heard this, they erupted with happiness. Zhao Mu casually tossed the storage bag into the air and countless spirit stones spilled out. It became a literal rain of spirit stone. People screamed in excitement. Many of them dropped to their knees, their faces filled with joy. Some even hugged armfuls of spirit stones, their eyes shining with excitement. At that moment, the system's voice echoed. Because Zhao Mu distributed spirit stones to others, the system activated a 1,000 times return. As a result, Zhao Mu received 9 million spirit stones from the system. Hearing this, a satisfied smile appeared on Zhao Mu's face. Laughing inwardly, he thought that he wouldn't be lacking spirit stones for quite some time now. After that, Zhao Mu went to senior brother Wang Chan. He handed him a pill and said that ever since Zhao Mu entered the sect, Wang Chan had helped him a lot and taken good care of him. Now it was Zhao Mu's turn to repay that kindness. Instead of spirit stones, he gave him a pill. The moment senior brother Wang Chan saw it, he was shocked. It was actually a chi refining pill. Hesitating, he immediately refused, saying it was far too precious and that he didn't have the courage to accept such a gift. Zhao Mu didn't bother arguing. He directly tossed the pill straight into senior brother Wang Chan's mouth. Zhao Mu told him not to think too much, just swallow it, and whatever happened next, they would deal with it later. As the pill entered his mouth, the system's voice appeared again. Because Zhao Mu gave a chi refining pill, the system activated a 1-times return. The reward, a second-grade foundation established. Hearing this, Zhao Mu smiled quietly to himself. Senior brother Wang Chan coughed and then said, "Seriously, I must admit, Zhao Mu, from now on, I'll see you in a completely new light. But the person backing Hu Gang, new AI, is not someone small. My advice is that you should quickly join the outer sect and find someone to support." Zhao Mu nodded, saying that this was exactly his intention as well. Sometime later, the scene shifted to the sect management hall. Inside, a middle-aged man stood before a massive furnace, seemingly refining a pill while chanting incantations to control the fire. This man was the outer sect manager, Zhang Dingke. Just then, Zhao Mu entered and greeted Zhang with a smile. Zhang remained silent, giving Zhao Mu only a cold sideways glance while focusing on the furnace. But due to the distraction, the fire went out of control. The furnace exploded. Zhao Mu was stunned and blurted out, "Holy crap." Zhang Dingke coughed as he stepped out through the smoke and immediately blamed everything on Zhao Mu, saying Zhao Mu had disturbed his focus and ruined the pill refinement process. He angrily told Zhao Mu to leave at once. Zhao Mu was completely confused and pointed at himself in disbelief. Inside, he realized Zhang must have done this on purpose. The pill wasn't even that precious, just a purple chi pill. Something felt off. Someone must be behind this. Despite everything, Zhao Mu stayed calm. Zhang angrily asked why he was still standing there. Zhao Mu politely told him not to be anxious and took out 500 spirit stones as an apology. Seeing so many spirit stones, Zhang nearly spit out the water he was drinking. His attitude instantly changed, and he warmly accepted them, smiling as he asked if Zhao Mu had come to apply for the outer sect. He promises to complete the process immediately. Zhao Mu then casually asks who exactly is blocking his promotion to the outer sect. Zhang pretends to hesitate, saying he only solves problems for money and doesn't reveal secrets easily. Zhao Mu understands instantly. He takes out several storage bags filled with spirit stones and asks if this is enough. Zhang's eyes widen in shock. He accepts everything, coughs, and asks Zhao Mu to come closer. Using small stone fragments, he draws the image of a fox. The moment Zhao Mu sees it, he understands everything. The mastermind behind all this is Chu Jiren. Chu Jiren holds a transcendent status in the outer sect. Spies and eyes are everywhere, and sooner or later, Zhao Mu will be targeted. That's a problem. Thanking Zhang for the information, Zhao Mu leaves. He mounts his great sword and flies away at incredible speed, thinking that the only option now is to find Lucha and hide at her place for a while. The scene shifts again. Zhao Mu arrives at Lucha's residence. It is already evening and night has fallen. From a distance, he sees two figures exiting Lu Chai's room. One of them is a young man, Long Tian Xiang, ranked 5th among the heavenly prides of the Yuan Demon Sect. The other is an old man, Lu Haikong, the 12th elder of the Yuan Demon Sect. Outside the brightly lit pavilion, an elderly man stroked his beard, his eyes crinkling with satisfaction. Now that Chen has achieved core formation, I think the matter of your marriage alliance should be put on the agenda, he declared, his voice carrying the weight of familial expectation. The young man beside him, Chen, bowed his head in a show of respectful compliance. I understand, he replied smoothly. Once I take first place in this year's grand hunting competition, I will marry your granddaughter. The elder's laughter rang out through the courtyard, a booming sound of triumph. Haha, this old man really looks forward to the day of your wedding. Watching from the shadows, hidden by the encroaching night and the estate's architecture, another young man watched the pair with a cold, narrowed gaze. A sneer curled his lip as he watched the golden boy secure his future. Tusk, so it's Ayong Long, he muttered to himself, the name tasting like ash. He didn't linger. With a sudden burst of golden spiritual energy that flared like a falling star, he vanished from his perch, hurtling toward a different wing of the palace. Senior sister, are you there? He called out as he landed. The door slid open to reveal a woman in white robes, her expression brightening the moment she saw him. Junior brother Zia, she exclaimed, her voice honeyed and welcome. Zia Mu stepped inside, the remnants of his golden aura fading. Did Long Tianxiang come to find you to discuss the marriage? He asked, his tone probing. The woman's demeanor shifted instantly. She stepped closer to Zia Mu, her expression souring at the mere mention of the name. Don't mention his name in front of me, she snapped, her eyes flashing with genuine irritation. I don't like hearing it. She softened as she moved into his space, eventually settling herself comfortably on his lap, her arm draped over his shoulder. Zia Mu leaned back, a smug knowing smile playing on his lips as she took the initiative. By the way, why did you take the initiative to come find me? She asked, her voice dropping to a playful whisper. Zia Mu's smile took on a sharper, more bitter edge as he thought of the restrictions placed upon him. It's all because of that vixen not letting me enter the outer sect. The woman's face contorted with a flash of indignation as she thought of Chu Jiren. HMPA. I have already broken through the 9 mansions, she declared, her fists clenching as her spiritual energy pulsed with renewed vigor. Her eyes hardened with a competitive fire. Wait until I consolidate my cultivation. I'll go challenge her in a few days. Her expression softened instantly as she looked back down at Zia Mu, her irritation replaced by a flirtatious warmth. However, that I was able to break through to core formation so quickly is all thanks to you, she whispered, leaning in closer until her breath tickled his ear. Senior sister, if you're like this, I won't be able to hold back my pure yang power, he warned, his voice low and laced with intent. She didn't flinch. Instead, she pressed herself against him, a daring smile on her lips. Then don't hold back, she challenged. She began to pull at her robes, her eyes locked onto his. Junior brother, I want you to help me cultivate. Senior. Sister, wait, Zia Mu managed to bark out, though his protest was weak and quickly drowned out by the heat of the moment. The moon hung high over the estate, casting long shadows through the paper screens of the pavilion. From outside, only the silhouettes of the two could be seen moving against the soft light, accompanied by the occasional muffled cry of junior brother that drifted into the quiet night air. Hours later, the room was still. The woman lay back against the silk cushions, her hair a dark fan across the bedding as she struggled to catch her breath. Huff huff she exhaled, her body limp and eyes closed in the afterglow of their session. Zia Mu sat up, his long hair falling over his bare shoulders as he stretched. A translucent blue system interface flickered into existence before his eyes, displaying his latest gain. You were harvested of your red yang power, triggered 50 times return. Red yang power increased slightly. Zia Mu stared at the notification, his brow furrowing in disappointment. Ha, why is it so little? He muttered to himself. The system chimed again, a cold mechanical voice echoing in his mind to address his dissatisfaction. You have been harvested by Lu Chai too many times. The return rewards will gradually decay. That makes sense, but it's annoying. Zia Mu let out a weary sigh, realizing that his return system was reaching its limit with his senior sister. He would need to find new ways, or perhaps new partners, to keep his rapid ascent to power from stalling. Zia Mu leaned back, a pensive look crossing his face. It seems investing too much in one person causes the multiplier to decrease, he reasoned. A new plan began to form in his mind. An image of himself surrounded by a group of senior sisters, all eager to cultivate. Perhaps finding a few more senior sisters to cultivate with can increase the system's drop rate. Tapped his chin, a smirk returning to his lip. I'm definitely busy, he chuckled to himself. Forget it, I'll think about these things later. He crossed his legs and closed his eyes, focusing his intent on the spirit stones scattered around. A golden aura flared to life, his hair rising as the energy surged through his meridian. Building up my cultivation, becoming stronger is the absolute truth. The system interface updated rapidly. You have consumed 10 middle-grade spirit stone. You have consumed 50 low-grade spirit stone. Wait, what? Zia Mu blinked, his eyes snapping open as the golden light faded. I haven't even broken through to the 5th level yet. He looked down at the empty husks of the stones, his mind racing. The system really consumes a lot of resources. It feels like I need to continue accumulating rewards. A sudden, sharp creak from the window startled. He turned his head, his senses on high alert. He stood and threw open the window, peering out into the moonlight night. What was that just now? To his shock, he found a woman crouching just outside, her eyes wide as she was caught peering in. Zhao Mu stared back, his heart racing at the sudden intrusion into his private chamber. The room hummed with a tense, expectant energy as the muscular man looked up, his voice trembling slightly with a mix of awe and nerve. "Saintess," he stammered, his eyes wide. The woman standing before him exuded a cold, commanding grace. She wore a striking white and purple habit that clung to her frame, her long dark hair cascading down her back. "Call me Zixuan," she corrected, her tone leaving no room for argument. He settled back onto the floor, a nervous, sheepish grin spreading across his face as he tried to mask his intimidation with curiosity. He couldn't help but wonder to himself, I wonder what business lady Zixuan has to seek me out specially. And Zixuan didn't keep him waiting. She leaned in closer, her presence overwhelming. "I want your pure yang power to help me cultivate," she stated bluntly. The man's eyes bulged. "Ha!" Before he could process the request, Zixuan reached out with a deliberate, firm touch. She pressed her finger against his abdomen, right at his center of power. Lady Zixuan stopped joking around. He managed to choke out, his body tensing under the sudden influx of power. "Your cultivation efficiency is the highest. You shouldn't need my help, right?" But Zixuan was beyond words. A massive surge of purple spiritual energy erupted from her body, radiating outward in violent waves that shook the very air of the room. The sheer force of her aura was suffocating. "Good grief," the man shouted, pinned down. The sheer weight of the atmosphere. As the purple light engulfed them both, he felt his own energy being pulled into the vortex. What terrifying spiritual pressure. Zixuan stood over him, her silhouette framed by the swirling vortex of her own power. "Cut the crap," she commanded, her voice cold and impatient. "You only need to answer if you are willing or not." The man gritted his teeth, the violet energy beginning to coalesce in a bright glow at the center of his chest. Despite the overwhelming pressure, he managed a strained, subservient smile. Since Lady Zixuan commands it, of course I am willing," he replied, though his internal thoughts were far more rebellious. Where there's life, there's hope, he mused darkly, his gaze fixed on her. "Sooner or later, I'll trample this woman beneath my feet," hiding his true intentions behind a mask of helpfulness. He leaned forward with a sly grin. "I just don't know what positions Lady Zixuan prefers so that I can cooperate with your harvesting," he added suggestively. Zixuan met his gaze with a sharp, piercing look, her expression unreadable as she processed his bold remark. She didn't waste another moment on words. Turning slightly, she gestured toward a massive swirling portal of purple energy that had opened in the center of the room. "Don't ask what you shouldn't ask," she stated firmly. With a sudden flash of light, the portal pulsed, transporting them away from the chamber. They reappeared at the purple sky cave abode, a secluded sanctuary nestled against a massive ancient tree, adorned with glowing lanterns and cherry blossom. The atmosphere here was serene yet heavy with spiritual energy. Zixuan stepped forward toward the entrance of the cave dwelling without looking back. "Keep up," she ordered, her voice echoing through the quiet mountain air as the man followed closely behind her. "This is the purple sky cave abode where I cultivate in seclusion. No one will disturb us," she explained as they walked through the petal-strewn path. Suddenly, she stopped and turned, her eyes widening in shock. "What are you doing?" The man had his hands on his waistband, ready to disrobe. Cooperating with your harvesting," he replied nonchalantly. Zixuan's face flushed with a mixture of anger and embarrassment. "I don't need you to take off your clothes. I have my own arrangements," she snapped. The man just chuckled, rubbing the back of his head. "So, Lady Zixuan likes to take the initiative. I often encounter this type too," he continued to boast. "However, based on my experience, the effect of mutual cooperation in harvesting is..." His sentence was cut short as a strip of white cloth whipped through the air, wrapping tightly around his mouth and eye. Muffled sounds came from him as he grunted, stumbling back as he was effectively silenced and blinded. Zixuan stood her ground, her expression hardening as she began to channel her energy, petals swirling around her in a magical gale. "Close your eyes and mouth immediately and help me cultivate," she commanded, her voice dropping to a dangerous whisper. "Otherwise die." The water exploded upward as the man breached the surface, gasping for air with a sharp puff. Water cascaded down his muscular frame, his long hair slicked back by the soak. He stood amidst the swirling current, still finding his bearings when a cold, commanding voice cut through the sound of the rushing water. "Wash your body clean," the saintess ordered. She stood on the bank, her presence imposing despite the serene cherry blossoms blooming behind him. His wet hair framed a face of forced obedience. "As you command, Lady Saintess." He stepped from the water, his mind racing with disbelief. "Am I dreaming?" "Shut up," she snapped, cutting his internal monologue short. She didn't wait for a reply. With a flick of her hand, a surge of violet energy erupted. Before he could process the shift in the air, he was lifted and thrown through the air, shrouded in a glowing purple haze. The transition was a blur of motion and magic. He hit the bed with a heavy thud, his limbs pinned by glowing restraints that pulsed with an ethereal light. He strained against his bonds, his eyes wide as he realized the gravity of his situation. "I didn't expect the saintess to be this powerful. I can't resist at all," he thought, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple. The raw power she exerted was overwhelming, leaving him pinned and vulnerable. Ha! His breath hitched as a shadow loomed over him. The cold authority of the saintess was gone, replaced by a sudden, jarring change in company. "Where is the saintess? Where is my saintess?" he cried out, his confusion peaking. Instead of the formidable woman who had just subdued him, two pink-haired fox girls sat atop. They looked down with playful, mischievous grins, their fox ears twitching with delight. "Ah, little brother," one chirped. "Are you surprised?" the other added, their presence turning his high-stakes captivity into something far more chaotic. The two fox sisters loomed over the man, their playful expressions masking a calculated purpose. "What's wrong, junior brother? Are we sisters not pretty enough?" One teased, her voice sacked. The other leaned in closer, explaining their nature with a chilling nonchalance. "We are puppets created by the master specifically to exchange yin and yang power with you." They pressed their advantage, their tails swaying as they pinned him further into the bedding. "Junior brother, you must cooperate well. We'll get it done within 2 hours," one promised. A sharp, defiant grin spread across the man's face. He wasn't intimidated. He was insulted. She actually found tools to replace her in extracting my yang power. And 2 hours? Who is she looking down on? "Ah," one of the sisters gasped as his hands suddenly clamped onto her shoulder. "Then I'll let you know my true strength," he roared. With a sudden burst of explosive power, he flipped the script. He surged upward, pinning both sisters beneath him in a flurry of motion. Startled cries of "ah" and "don't" filled the room as he asserted his dominance. The fox girls, once the aggressors, were now the ones overwhelmed. "Go easier on my sister, you bastard," one cried out, her face flushed with a mix of shock and exertion. He didn't slow down, his eyes glowing with a fierce intensity as he pushed back against their master's plan. Outside, the full moon hung high over the tranquil cherry blossoms, a stark contrast to the chaos unfolding within. Muffled shouts of "ah, quick, stop it," and no more drifted through the night air. The saintess sat nearby, her chin resting on her hand as she listened to the commotion with a deepening scowl. Her composure was slipping, replaced by a look of sheer annoyance. "How long is this bastard going to go at it?" she muttered, her patience clearly wearing thin. Inside the steam-filled room, the two fox puppets lay slumped and utterly exhausted, their tails limp as they gasped for breath. The man remained in the water, looking remarkably unfazed and refreshed, his gaze fixed on the ceiling as the 2-hour limit became a distant memory. The man remained in the water, looking remarkably unfazed. "This hot spring can actually enhance my pure yang power," he realized, finding himself still full of energy even after the long ordeal. The fox sisters, trembling and disheveled, eventually knelt before the saintess. "Lady Saintess, we deserve death for our crimes," they sobbed, blaming their own unfaithfulness for the delay. To their surprise, the saintess fanned herself, her face flushed as she looked away. "I was watching the whole process. This matter is not your fault," she admitted quietly. Regaining her composure, she commanded, "You two leave the red yang liquid behind. You may go down to repair and heal." They bowed deeply, leaving 2 golden bowls of liquid before retreating. Once they were gone, the saintess approached the man with a smug, knowing grin. He said, "Lady Saintess, my performance this time wasn't bad, right?" She crossed her arms, refusing to give him the satisfaction. "It was just so-so," she replied coolly, though her lingering blush suggested otherwise. The saintess's slender hand extended, offering a glowing pouch that hummed with concentrated energy. "This is your reward," she declared, her voice cool and authoritative. The young man accepted the gift with wide-eyed disbelief. Inside were 10 million spirit stones and 4 bottles of top-grade Foundation establishment pills, a fortune by any standard. A broad, triumphant grin broke across his face as he marveled at the loot. He, as expected of the saintess. She is truly generous, he thought, his excitement barely contained as he donned his dark robes once more. However, his lingering presence quickly wore out its welcome. The saintess turned to him, her expression hardening. "You're still hanging around. What are you dawdling off here for?" Cheekily, he rubbed his chin, a playful glint in his eyes. "Lady Saintess, actually, if you want to absorb my yang power, the effect should be better if we truly dual cultivate." The suggestion hit its mark. A deep embarrassed flush crept up the saintess's neck as she stammered a quiet "you," before her embarrassment turned into a flash of purple spiritual fury. "Get out. I don't want to see you right now." With a violent flick of her wrist, a surge of magical energy erupted, engulfed him in a brilliant violet light. Before he could utter another word of protest, he was forcibly warped away, leaving the flustered saintess behind in a swirl of cherry blossom. He materialized back at Lucha's side, stumbling slightly as the teleportation faded. He couldn't help but feel a sense of awe at the saintess's sheer power. "I'm back. The saintess's methods are indeed unfathomable," he muttered, shaking off the spatial vertigo. Suddenly, a shimmering blue system interface flickered into existence before his eye. The text glowed with a welcome notification. "System update. You have contributed a large amount of red yang power to Nzixu. Red yang's sacred body has greatly improved." A surge of warmth flooded his limbs as golden aura began to radiate from his form. He sat cross-legged, entering a state of deep cultivation to stabilize the sudden influx of power. As the golden flames of his aura intensified, a smirk touched his lips. It confirmed his suspicion. Interacting with and charging powerful individuals yielded far greater system rewards than he had initially imagined. The young man allowed himself a moment of quiet satisfaction as he calculated his position. With a thoughtful finger to his chin, he mused that as long as the saintess required his red yang power, his foothold within the sect was practically guaranteed. Back in her private quarters, the saintess stared down at a small, shallow bowl containing a shimmering golden substance. A faint, expectant smile played on her lips as she prepared to test the essence he had provided. "I hope this brat's red yang liquid doesn't disappoint me," she whispered to herself. As she consumed the essence, she was immediately struck by its potency. However, an unexpected side effect took hold. A vivid, hazy vision of the young man flashed through her mind, his image appearing intimate and dangerously close. Her composure shattered instantly. Gah! Her head snapped back, her face flushing a deep burning crimson as she struggled against the mental intrusion. Shaking her head violently to clear the unwanted thoughts, she gritted her teeth in frustration. "Ha, a mere furnace. Don't think you can affect my cultivation." Determined to reclaim her focus, she sat upright, channeling a surge of violet spiritual energy that flared around her like a protective aura. She forced herself back into a meditative state, desperate to burn away the distraction. Hidden nearby, two fox-eared attendants watched the scene from the shadows of the cherry blossom tree. They exchanged surprised glances, whispering in hushed tones about the rare sight before them. "The Lady Saintess actually gets distracted while cultivate," one noted, her eyes wide with curiosity. "Could it be that the brat's red yang liquid has side effects?" The other wondered aloud, watching the saintess struggle to maintain her icy exterior. The night eventually bled into morning, the tension of the previous evening giving way to the quiet serenity of the sect courtyard as the sun rose on a new day. The next morning, sunlight spilled into the quiet infirmary. Shilaini rose with a long, weary yawn, stretching her limbs as she woke. Her eyes soon fell upon the young man, who was already sitting cross-legged on the floor, enveloped in a radiant golden glow as he continued his cultivation. "Getting up so early to cultivate. Junior brother Zhao Mu is getting more and more diligent," she remarked, watching him with a mixture of pride and amusement. He opened his eyes, a confident smirk playing on his lips. "I just coincidentally felt a trace of inspiration for a break," he replied smoothly. Shilaini leaned in close, her expression brightening with excitement as she rested a hand on his shoulder. "Junior brother, since your realm has improved now, why don't you challenge the climbing heaven road with..." The morning air at the St. Yen Demon Sect was heavy with the weight of ancient power. Before them stood the massive gateway to the heavenly realm, a towering structure pulsing with a swirling violet vortex of energy. It was the ultimate proving ground, a place where the legends of tomorrow were forged through trials of blood and spirit. The path ahead was daunting. Beyond the portal lay a series of floating islands, each suspended in a dark void and lit by the eerie, sickly green glow of spirit lamp. These were the layers of the trial, and as the record stated, only those qualified to rank in the top 100 of the outer sect dared to set foot there. From the third layer onward, the difficulty spiked exponentially. Core formation level demons would begin to manifest, ready to tear any unworthy cultivator asunder. Standing amidst the crowd of departing disciples, the young man turned to his companion, his voice laced mix of concern and gratitude. "Senior sister, actually, you don't have to go to this extent," he said softly. The woman beside him, elegant and poised, didn't hesitate. "This isn't just helping you. It is also helping myself," she replied, her gaze fixed on the challenge ahead. She spoke of her rival, Chu Jiren, often hailed as the female cultivator with the most potential in the outer sect. It was a title she could not simply let stand unchallenged. For her, this trial was a bridge between the human and demon races, a chance to see once and for all which side held the superior strength. While this St. Yen Demon Sect ostensibly treated humans and demons equally, the friction and rivalry between them remained a simmering fire that only combat could quench. "I am also an outer disciple now," the young man added, a determined smile finally breaking through his worry. "It just so happens we can go together." With a shared look of resolve, the two stepped forward. "All right," she agreed, her expression brightening as they moved toward the violet light of the gate, ready to carve their names into the history of the sect. As they approached the shimmering threshold, the reality of the trial's difficulty manifested in the battered figures of those returning. 3 disciples stumbled out from the violet vortex, their clothes torn and faces bruised. "Sigh. Failed again," one of them lamented, wiping sweat from his brow. "The monsters on the third layer of the heavenly road are just this terrifying. I really don't know how those heavenly prides made it past." His companion, leaning heavily on his knees, offered a sharp retort. "Nonsense. Otherwise, how could they be called heavenly prides?" Amidst the defeated, one figure stood out, a towering, muscular man with curved horns protruding from his head. He basked in the adulation of several lower-ranking disciples who bowed respectfully before him. "Senior brother Niu is still the formidable one praised. In this challenge of the climbing heaven road, his ranking rose by a whole 47 places. Given time, there will surely be a seat for Brother Niu within the top 10 of the outer sect heavenly pride rank." "Senior Brother Niu, how did you suddenly become so much stronger during this period?" another asked, eyes wide with curiosity. "Niu AI currently ranked 79th on the outer sect heavenly pride rank, let out a booming, arrogant laugh. Ha, of course it's my talent and hard work. However, his bravado flickered for a brief second as a sharp feminine voice cut through the air behind him. New AI, don't forget who helped you improve your cultivation. A woman with striking red hair and a commanding presence stood with her arms crossed, her eyes cold as she stared him down. Hurry up and complete the task I gave you. The sudden appearance of the woman caused New Ai's confident smirk to tighten into a bead of nervous sweat. It was clear that his talent and hard work had a secret benefactor, and she was not one to be kept waiting. Yes, 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 New AI barked, snapping to attention like a disciplined soldier under the red-haired woman's sharp gaze. His previous arrogance evaporated instantly, replaced by a desperate eagerness to please his benefactor. However, as he turned to depart, his eyes snagged on two familiar figures walking across the stone plaza. His expression curdled into a sneer as he loomed over them. He pointed a thick finger at the young man. Junior sister Lucha, you aren't planning to go up the climbing heaven road with this soft rice-eating pretty boy, are you? The insult hung in the air for only a second before the woman beside the young man countered with a playful yet biting smile. Pretty boy. How did I hear that you were fixed by this pretty boy? The jab hit its mark. New Ai's face flushed a violent shade of red, his eyes bulging with fury as the surrounding disciples whispered. HMPH, that was just him sneaking an attack on me while it was chaotic, he roared, his pride wounded and desperate for a face-saving excuse. The young man didn't even grant New AI the dignity of a glance. He kept walking, his voice calm and dismissive as he spoke to his companion. A defeated opponent shouldn't be making a spectacle of himself. We still have to go charge the climbing heaven road. Bastard, New AI hissed through gritted teeth, watching their retreating backs. The humiliation was too much to bear. Unable to contain his rage, New AI let out a guttural primal scream and slammed his fist into the ground with shattering force. A violent explosion of red energy erupted around him, cracking the stone tiles into fragments as he vented his frustration at the pretty boy who had so effortlessly brushed him aside. Stop right there. New Ai's roar echoed across the plaza as he launched a massive glowing stone projectile toward the pair. The young man reacted with fluid grace, catching senior sister Lucha around the waist and leaping backward just as the boulder shattered against the ground where they had stood a heartbeat before. As the dust settled, a shimmering red barrier erupted from the earth, encircling the two men. A mechanical prompt flickered into existence, announcing the formalization of the conflict. Outer disciple New AI has issued a sparring challenge. Do you choose to accept or refuse? He chuckled, his form silhouetted against the crimson glow of the challenge arena. Senior sister Luchai's face paled with worry. Don't accept, she urged, her voice tight. His cultivation has broken through quite a bit. Don't be provoked. The young man didn't look back, a calm, confident smile playing on his lips. Senior sister, rest assured, I know my limits. He turned his gaze back to the hulking figure of New AI. Rather than showing fear, his expression turned mischievous. Just sparring is boring. Why not add a wager? New AI paused. His massive arms crossed over his chest. Crimson light swirled around the horned cultivator as he gestured to a weapon hovering in the air behind him, a sleek glowing blade. Good, New AI declared, his voice booming with renewed arrogance. If I lose, I'll return this second-grade flying sword to you. The young man didn't hesitate, a small gold ring materializing in the palm of his hand, glowing with a soft amber light. Then I'll use the storage ring on my hand as the bet, he countered smoothly. With the stakes set, a system notification flared to life between them. Challenge effect. The two opponents locked eyes. New AI with a savage, toothy grin of anticipation and the young man with a calm, unshakable smirk. The surrounding crowd began to buzz with excitement. There's a challenge match on the square, one disciple whispered, leaning in. I heard it's New AI and that pretty boy from the servant court. Another replied as the gossip spread like wildfire through the rank. That Zhao Mu, didn't he just get promoted to outer disciple? One asked, his brow furrowed in confusion. Others were less curious and more resentful. Rumors of Zhao Mu's pure yang constitution and his alleged relationships with the elite female cultivators of the 9 mystic arts sparked a wave of jealousy. He's selling his body for glory, simply the shame of the Demon Sect, a disgruntled observer spat. Amidst the growing chatter, the red-haired woman stepped forward, her presence instantly silencing the disciples around her. She looked at senior sister Lucha with a predatory knowing smile. I was saying junior brother Zia was always absent-minded when being harvested by me, she purred, her eyes trailing over Lucha. Turns out he had a little lover like. Recognition flared in Luchai's eyes, her expression hardening. It is really you. The red-haired woman let out a dark melodic laugh, her fingers playing with the air as if she were already crushing something fragile. But this can be considered a good thing. For a bird that is bent on flying away, the best ending is to be pinched to death in one's own hands. The red-haired woman, Chu Jiren, leaned in, her voice a cold command that cut through the tension of the arena. Use your full strength, regardless of life or death. Don't waste the opportunity I bestowed upon you. New Ai's eyes flared with a murderous light as he slammed his fists together. Senior sister, rest assured, New AI will definitely not disappoint you. With a thunderous roar, he charged. The ground beneath his feet shattered as he propelled himself forward, his massive frame wreathed in a flickering, violent orange aura. Senior sister Lucha's heart hammered against her ribs. "Junior brother Zia, look out," she screamed, her hands clenched in a futile gesture of protection. New AI leaped high into the air, his silhouette blotting out the sun as he descended like a falling meteor. "Die," he bellowed, bringing both fists down in a devastating overhead strike. The impact was cataclysmic. A massive explosion of red energy and dust erupted where the young man had been standing, sending a shockwave rippling through the plaza. The onlookers gasped, shielded by the barrier but stunned by the sheer ferocity of the attack. "This is afterimage step," one disciple stammered, eyes wide. New AI was already known for his strength, another added. Now that he has cultivated the afterimage step, his power has received a manifold boost. Worthy of being an expert in the top 100 of the Outer Sect Heavenly Pride rank, the consensus among the crowd was grim. Zhao Mu is definitely done for. This will probably become the quickest challenge match to end in the St. Yan Demon Sect. If New AI doesn't hold back his strength, Zhao Mu might even be in mortal danger. Chu Jiren watched the settling dust with a smug, triumphant expression. "Did you all see? Offending Chu Jiren leads to exactly this out," she declared, her eyes drifting back to the trembling Lucha. Lucha hissed, her voice shaking with rage and grief. Chu Jiren merely sighed, a mocking sound of feigned regret. "What a pity. If you had obediently acted as my dog, maybe you could have lived a little longer." The dust hadn't even settled before a collective gasp rippled through the onlook. Chu Jiren's smug expression froze, her eyes widening in sheer disbelief. "How is that possible?" she stammered, her voice losing its edge. "Blocked it. My eyes aren't playing tricks on me, right?" Nearby, another disciple stared in awe. "Truly incredible. Is the pure Yang constitution really that formidable?" As the haze cleared, the impossible reality was revealed. Zhao Mu wasn't just standing. He was casually holding New AI down. With a grip like iron, he had seized the brute by his massive horns, forcing the horned warrior to his knees. The ground beneath them was cracked from the previous impact, but Zhao Mu remained unscathed, looking down at his opponent with a mocking glint in his eyes. "Did you not eat?" Zhao Mu asked, his tone dripping with nonchalance. "Just this little bit of strength, bastard," New AI hissed, his face contorting with humiliation and rage as he struggled against the immovable grip. Seeing her pawn failing so miserably, Chu Jiren's panic turned into a desperate command. "Quickly eat the pill I gave you," she screamed from the sidelines, her composure completely shattered. New AI didn't need to be told twice. His eyes turned bloodshot as he pulled a small crimson pill from his palm. "This is what you forced me to do," he growled. Zhao Mu tilted his head slightly, a faint sigh escaping his lips as he watched the transformation begin. With a sharp gulp, New AI swallowed the medicine. The effect was instantaneous. A violent, jagged explosion of red aura erupted from New AI, forcing Zhao Mu to leap back. New AI's body began to warp and swell, his muscles bulging past human limits and his face elongating into a bestial snout. "I will let you witness my true form," he bellowed, his voice now a deep, guttural roar. His skin thickened into hide, and his feet shifted into powerful hooves, cracking the stone plaza beneath. Minotaur form activate. Standing nearly twice his original size and wreathed in a literal flame of demonic energy, the transformed New AI glared at Zhao Mu, ready to turn the square into a slaughterhouse. "That's not good." The air grew heavy as a dark realization dawned on the young cultivator. "Damn, there's an ox," he muttered, his brow furrowing as he watched the massive opponent across from. A woman in white robes turned her gaze toward the red-haired woman standing on the sidelines, her voice dripping with disdain. "You're too despicable, actually helping him cheat in the duel." Chu Jiren met her accusation with a playful, mocking tilt of her head. "How can this be considered cheating?" she asked, a dangerous glint in her eyes. In her palm, she cradled a glowing ethereal orb. "This demon spirit pill can stimulate the bloodline power within the demon race's bodies for a short time. This is inherently the power within us. It's just being stimulated by a pill." Behind her, the transformation was already underway. The ox demon let out a guttural roar, his body erupting in a violent shroud of crimson energy. His muscles surged and his horns sharpened into lethal points. "Today I will definitely make you die without an intact corpse," he bellowed, the ground cracking beneath his feet. With a thunderous stomp, he vanished into a blur of motion. Afterimage strike, the onlookers gasped in disbelief. To their untrained eyes, the demon had become a ghost. "Such fast speed! I actually have no way to clearly see senior brother's movements," one spectator stammered, his eyes wide with terror. "Is this the fully awakened barbaric ox bloodline?" Another whispered, paralyzed by the sheer pressure radiating from the arena. The young cultivator stood his ground, his expression remaining eerily calm. A sudden, sharp sound echoed through the air as the demon streaked past, though a crimson gash appeared instantly on his shoulder, tearing through his sleeve. He looked down at the wound, his eyes narrow. "Did just the wind pressure injure me?" But the duel reached an abrupt, violent conclusion before the demon could turn for another strike. A deafening thud shook the courtyard as the massive barbaric ox was slammed face first into the stone floor, his momentum completely broken. The sheer force of the impact sent a shockwave through the ground, ending the charge in a pathetic display of failed power. Beyond them, the massive glowing portal of the sect gate stood silent, the only witness to the sudden reversal of fortune. Shockwaves rippled through the air, sending the surrounding disciples stumbling back. "This impact force is way too strong, isn't it?" one cried out, shielding his eyes from the dust. The sheer pressure was suffocating. "The physical strength of the demon race really is incomparable to the human race," another gasped, watching the destruction with a mix of awe and terror. "How is this the power a Foundation Establishment Realm cultivator should have? Core formation would be nothing more than this." From the center of the crater, the ox demon hauled himself upright with a guttural howl. He clutched his head for a moment, shaking off the disorientation, but his rage only burned hotter. His muscles bulged, veins pulsing with the red aura of the pill. "I won't let you escape this time," he roared, charging forward like a mountain in motion. The young cultivator remained motionless, a faint, mocking smile playing on his lips as the demon closed the distance. "Your strength is indeed not small," he remarked casually, his voice cutting through the roar of the wind. But in a flash of golden light, his entire aura shifted. Before the demon's fist could connect, the cultivator moved. His own fist, wreathed in a blinding solar glow, met the demon's jaw with the force of a falling star. Crack! The sound of shattering bone echoed across the courtyard. The ox demon's head snapped back, his massive body lifted off the ground by the sheer velocity of the strike. He was sent spiraling through the air, a helpless mass of fur and muscle before slamming into the stone tiles once more. He skidded across the ground, carving a deep trench into the earth until he came to a mangled halt. That was brutal. The red-haired woman stood frozen, her composure completely shattered, the glow of her pill enhanced. Puppet was fading, replaced by the grim reality of his defeat. How is this possible?" she stammered, her face pale as she stared at the unconscious demon. Deep in the rubble, the ox demon lay broken, blood trickling from his mouth. One of his massive horns had been snapped clean off, a jagged reminder of the human's overwhelming, inexplicable strength. Silence fell over the arena, broken only by the ragged breathing of the defeated. The onlookers could hardly process what they had witnessed. To actually instantly kill the momentum of a demon transformation with just one move, it was unthinkable. Is the pure Yang constitution this powerful? One wondered aloud, staring at the radiant aura still clinging to the young cultivator. They whispered among themselves, questioning how Zhao Mu could have broken through Foundation establishment with such an exaggerated level of power, far surpassing anything they had seen before. Midst the shock, a young woman rushed to his side, her eyes sparkling with adoration. "Great, I really didn't misjudge him," she chirped, leaning into him with a bright smile. Zhao Mu looked down at her, a hint of sheepishness coloring his victory. "Senior sister, so many people are watching," he murmured, though he didn't pull away. Across the courtyard, the atmosphere was far more toxic. The red-haired woman stared down at the mangled heap of her champion, her face twisted in a mask of cold fury. "Useless trash," she spat, the words dripping with venom. She didn't spare a second glance for the fallen demon. "Carry him away," she commanded her subordinates. As the demon's lackeys scrambled to pick up the broken body of Boss Niu, Zhao Mu's voice rang out, stopping them in their tracks. "Wait a minute." The lackeys froze, their expressions a mix of fear and indignation. "Boss Niu has already been beaten like this by you. What more do you want?" One shouted while another grumbled that even if you kill the ox, it just means its head hit the ground. A third agreed. Zhao Mu simply smiled, a picture of feigned benevolence. "I am a reasonable person," he said, producing a heavy clinking sack. "Here is 10,000 spirit stones. Consider it your medical expenses for this time." With a casual flick of his wrist, he emptied the bag. A rain of shimmering, multicolored gems cascaded over the unconscious new AI, burying his battered face in a literal pile of wealth. The crowd erupted into a fresh wave of chatter. Some were appalled by the blatant display of wealth. "Zhao Mu is so arrogant to actually humiliate new AI like this," a spectator hissed. Yet others were swayed by the sheer scale of the gesture. "If you gave me 10,000 spirit stones, I'd be willing to get beaten too," a disciple joked. Even the skeptical had to admit, "You have to admit this pretty boy actually looks quite handsome right now." Unbeknownst to them, a holographic screen flickered into existence before Zhao Mu's eyes, visible only to him. Ding. Gave away 10,000 spirit stones, triggered a 100 times return, obtained 1 million spirit stones. Zhao Mu's smile didn't waver, but a flicker of disappointment crossed his internal thoughts. Only triggered a 100 times return. The red-haired woman watched the spectacle, her eyes narrowing as she clapped her hands slowly, mockingly. "Good, good, good," she said, her voice a low silk-wrapped blade. The duel was over, but the true game had clearly just begun. The red-haired woman stepped forward, her initial shock hardening into a predatory fascination. She reached out, her finger tracing the air toward Zhao Mu's chin in a mocking caress. "As expected of the man I've taken a fancy to," she purred, her eyes half-lidded. "This concubine likes you more and more. Return to my side now, and I will give you everything you desire." Zhao Mu's expression didn't waver. He didn't flinch, nor did he entertain the offer. Instead, he met her gaze with a cold, piercing intensity. "You are not worthy," he declared, his voice cutting through her honeyed words like a blade. The woman recoiled as if struck, her face contorting with sudden violent rage. Purple energy erupted from her body in a jagged, flickering aura. "What did you say?" she shrieked, the ground beneath her cracking under the weight of her killing intent. Before the tension could snap into a second duel, a blur of white and blue light intervened. Senior sister Luchai stepped firmly between them, her own frigid aura clashing against the woman's purple flames. "Zhao Mu is a person, not some cargo you can just casually discard after you're done using him," Luchai barked, her eyes blazing with protective fury. She leveled a finger direct at the red-haired woman, her voice ringing across the court. "I will challenge the climbing heaven road, surpass your rank, and then fairly and squarely issue a challenge to you. The harm you caused him, I will exact it back for him in full." With that final freezing ultimatum, Luchai turned on her heel. She grabbed Zhao Mu's hand and began to lead him away, leaving the other woman fuming in the dust. As they walked toward the swirling violet mist of the sect teleportation portal, the heavy atmosphere finally began to lift. Zhao Mu looked at his companion, a genuine smile tugging at his lips. "Senior sister Luchai, what you just said was so cool." Luchai didn't look back, but the slight tilt of her head betrayed her satisfaction. "HMPH, as long as you know," she replied, her voice softening just a fraction. Together, they stepped into the shimmering portal, their silhouettes vanishing into. Left behind in the arena, the red-haired woman stood alone, her aura thrashing like a wounded beast. "Bastards," she hissed, her teeth bared in a snarl of pure hatred. She stared at the spot where they had disappeared, her hands trembling with the urge to kill. Whispers of envy rippled through the outer sect of the St. Yan Demon Sect. At the center of the gossip was Zhao Mu, a rising star whose mere presence had ignited a heated rivalry between two of the sect's most prominent beauties. "To think these two stunning beauties are actually getting jealous over Zhao Mu," one onlooker remarked, his voice tinged with a mix of awe and frustration. The first, Chu Jiren, was already a legend, the 9th-ranked talent in the outer sect Heavenly Pride rank, a rising star of the Fox clan. The second, Luchai, was no less formidable. As the granddaughter of the 12th elder Lu Haikong, her noble status was matched only by her peerless beauty, which many claimed didn't lose out to Chu Jiren in the slightest. Far from the petty drama of the sect, nestled within the jagged peaks of the Demon Sect's holy land, specifically the 9-dragon sword mound, a different kind of power was stirring. Deep inside a secluded cavern, a young man sat in a meditative trance. His long hair defied gravity, floating upward as a violent purple spiritual aura surged around. Behind him loomed a massive, ornate sword, radiating an oppressive energy that seemed to vibrate through the very rock. With a sharp snap of his eyes, the cultivator broke his silence. A sudden flash of purple light erupted as he unleashed a devastating wave of sword kai. With a thunderous crack, a massive stone pillar was cleaved in two, the upper half sliding away as if it were nothing but paper. He didn't celebrate the feat. Instead, he simply closed his eyes again, his expression remaining cool and detached. Senior brother Ling remained seated, his posture as rigid as the mountain surrounding the 9-dragon sword mount. He held his fingers in a precise mudra, the purple energy swirling around him like a captured storm. As the stone shards from his previous strike still hung in the air, he let out a long, measured breath. "Just as well," he murmured, his voice echoing through the hollow cavern. The sheer destruction he had wrought seemed to offer him no satisfaction. His quiet contemplation was abruptly shattered by a heavy metallic footfall. "Reporting Senior Brother Ling," a voice boomed. Ling didn't move, but his brow furrowed slightly. Emerging from the shadows was Niu Ai's subordinate, a mountain of a man with curved horns and heavy plating. He lowered his head, clasping his hands in a respectful but urgent salute. He looked like a man carrying news he knew would be unwelcome. "Word is spreading in the outer sect that junior sister Luchai is getting jealous over a pretty boy with the Fox clan's Chu Jiren," the man reported, his voice tight with caution. "I was afraid this matter would affect your reputation, senior brother, so I came especially to report it." The air in the cave suddenly turned sharp. In an instant, Ling was on his feet, his aura shifting from a calm purple to a lethal, radiant gold. He didn't just stand, he radiated a pressure that forced the very atmosphere to compress. "You dare disturb my secluded cultivation for such a trivial matter." Ling's voice was no longer a murmur, it was a blade. Before the messenger could even stammer an apology, the cave was flooded with blinding light. A dozen spectral swords forged from pure golden chi manifested in a circular array. They hummed with a high-pitched, deadly vibration, their points all converging on the messenger. Warrior could only stare in wide-eyed terror as the radiant blades bit into the air just inches from his skin. That trivial gossip nearly cost him his life. The messenger trembled as the golden blades hummed inches from his throat. Fear, cold and paralyzing, washed over him. "Please don't blame me, Senior Brother Ling," he stammered, his hands still clasped in a desperate salute. "It was abrupt of this junior brother. I'll leave right now." He began to back away, eager to vanish before the senior brother's temper flared again. But as he turned to retreat, a calm, commanding voice stopped him in his tracks. "Hold on." The messenger froze, his heart hammering against his ribs. He turned back slowly, wondering if he had any other instructions to receive. Before he could process the thought, Ling made a swift, fluid motion with his arm. A burst of golden energy surged forward, striking the messenger squarely in the chest. "Arg!" the man cried out as the force lifted him off his feet, sending him tumbling backward across the cavern floor. He gasped for air, clutching at his sternum where the impact had landed. "Senior brother Ling, why is this?" Ling stood silhouetted against the purple glow of his massive sword, his expression unreadable. "Stop struggling and take a good look at your chest," he commanded. The messenger looked down and his eyes widened in disbelief. Embedded within his skin was a glowing, translucent golden blade, a miniature replica of Ling's own sword. It pulsed with a rhythmic rainbow-hued light, radiating a power that made his own chi feel like a stagnant pond. "This is a strand of sword intent I condensed," Ling explained, his voice devoid of emotion. The messenger stared at the brand, still confused. "What does senior brother Ling mean?" Ling's gaze sharpened, his eyes narrowing as he looked toward the cave entrance. "There are always some ants who don't know the immensity of heaven and earth." He paused, a cold, predatory smile playing on his lips. "Just get rid of him from me." Understanding dawned on the messenger, replaced instantly by a surge of newfound confidence. The sword intent burned within him, granting him a fraction of Ling's overwhelming strength. A sinister grin spread across his face as a golden aura began to billow around his massive frame. "Hee, thank you, senior brother Ling," he chuckled, his voice now booming with unearned power. As the messenger departed to carry out his mission, the scene shifted far away to the climbing heaven road. Under a violet sky, a different duo walked across a shimmering liquid-like floor that rippled with every step. Beside him, his senior sister adjusted her robes, her expression a mix of duty and concern. "The climbing heaven road will automatically record the number of floors a disciple climbs," she explained, her voice steady despite the gravity of the trial ahead. "Since it's your first time, you will be separated from me." Zhao Mu nodded, his gaze fixed on the path forward. "Understood." A sudden, soft rustle made him turn. Senior sister Lucha had moved closer, her face flushing a deep crimson. Before he could react, she leaned in, her lips meeting his in a brief, bashful kiss that caught him completely off guard. The moment was fleeting. She pulled away just as quickly, turning to leave with a final, lingering look. "Remember, you must be careful," she called out, her figure already beginning to fade into the white haze of the trial. Zhao Mu watched her disappear, a faint, confident smirk playing on his lips as he touched his fingers to his mouth. "You're the one who should be careful, senior sister," he murmured to the empty air. Left alone, he turned back to the road. The silence was absolute until a low, guttural growl vibrated through the mist. The clouds ahead parted, revealing towering monstrous silhouettes. First came a gargantuan red-crested rooster with piercing crimson eyes, followed by a snarling maimed beast that looked like a nightmare born of a wolf and a lion. Looming over them all was a grotesque reptilian titan with a long dripping tongue that flicked hungrily at the air. The monsters didn't hesitate. With a deafening roar, they lunged simultaneously, their massive claws and beaks descending toward the lone cultivator. The ground groaned under their weight as they closed in for the kill. The dust hadn't even settled before the next wave of the trial made itself known. Standing at the threshold of the first floor, Zhao Mu faced a trio of Foundation Establishment Realm demon beasts. To any newly admitted outer disciple, this would have been an impassable wall, a death sentence delivered in the form of claws and fangs. The maimed beast moved, first curling into a serrated, spinning ball of fur and muscle. It launched itself like a living cannonball, tearing through the stone floor as it streaked toward him. Simultaneously, the sky darkened as the other beasts rained down sharp quill-like projectiles from above. Zhao Mu didn't panic. He moved with a predatory grace, his eyes gleaming with a manic excitement. "It's my turn to counterattack," he roared. Igniting his internal energy, he became a blur of motion. With a devastating punch that radiated a golden heat, he struck the spinning beast mid-air. The impact was cataclysmic. The sheer force of his strike didn't just stop the beast, it sent them flying backward in a tangled heap of broken limbs and stunned cries. Standing over the defeated creatures, Zhao Mu let out a dismissive huff, a small flame flickering from his fingertips. "This is way too easy." As the bodies of the demon beasts dissolved into mist, a formal notification appeared before him, shimmering in the air. "Past the first floor. You may choose one of 3 rewards. 3 ethereal items manifested in floating golden orbs, a jagged dagger, a small vial of elixir, and an ancient jade-green manual." Zhao Mu's eyes immediately locked onto the book. "Yellow rank high-grade technique, burning flame palm," he read aloud, a wide, hungry grin spreading across his face. "I was just worrying about not having a combat technique to match the red yang sacred body. This is like someone handing me a pillow just when I'm sleepy." He snatched the manual from the air, the golden light of the reward absorbing into his form. "You're the one." Without wasting a second, he flipped the manual open. Even as the trial path loomed ahead, he began to process the complex instructions. "Let me see. First, draw the true fire of the sun into the body." As he spoke, the air around him began to warp and shimmer. Tendrils of golden fire snaked around his arms, and his right hand began to glow with an intense crimson heat. Then use the power of the bright sun and blazing heat to enhance the palm technique's power. The transformation was near instant. Zhao Mu stood bathed in a radiant solar aura, his eyes burning with the newfound power of the sun itself. The air in the cavernous hallway ignited as Zhao Mu tested his newly acquired strength. With a sharp, decisive motion of his hand, he unleashed a searing arc of golden energy. The blast slammed into a massive pile of boulders blocking his path, the force of the burning flame palm detonating with enough heat to melt stone. Fragments of rock were propelled into the air, illuminated by the radiant solar afterglow of his strike. Standing amidst the smoke and settling debris, Zhao Mu didn't even break a sweat. He clutched the manual in one hand, a smirk of pure satisfaction crossing his face as he surveyed the destruction he had caused. The power of the Red Yang sacred body, finally paired with a fitting technique, felt more natural than he had ever imagined. "Very nice," he murmured, his voice echoing through the settling dust. He looked toward the shimmering, ethereal steps that had manifested further down the path, leading upward into the swirling white mists of the trial. "Second floor, here I come." The blue light of the third layer of the climbing heaven road pulsed with a violent rhythmic energy. With a thunderous boom, a pillar of azure kai erupted from the center of the platform, signaling the start of the final trial for this level. Luchai moved with the fluid grace of a winter storm. As a massive stone beast lunged from the shadows, she didn't flinch. With a sharp exhale, she swung her blade in a wide, shimmering arc. A crescent of blue energy tore through the air, severing the monster's arm in a single decisive strike. "Ha!" she cried, her voice echoing against the cold stone. As the beast dissolved into motes of light, a mechanical voice resonated through the chamber. "Past the third layer. You can choose one of 3 rewards." Luchai sheathed her sword partially, her gaze fixed on the 3 glowing orbs of light appearing before her. She had cleared the stage, but the true challenge, the 4th layer, loomed ahead on the heavenly pride rank. Outside the trial grounds, a crowd of disciples gathered around the massive glowing violet scoreboard. Murmurs of awe rippled through the sect as the rankings shifted. Luchai had officially rushed into the top 50. She had bypassed the 3rd layer and was already preparing for the 4th. The current record holder, Nan Wang, had persisted in the 4th layer for a full 2 hours. As long as Senior Sister Luchai can hold on for 15 minutes, she can enter the top 10 of the outer sect heavenly pride rank, one disciple noted, his eyes fixed on the purple glow. Suddenly, the board flickered. A new name burned into the violet surface with aggressive strokes. Zhao Mu, the crowd gasped. "Look, Zhao Mu's name has also appeared." To enter the top 1,000 just after passing the 1st layer, his clearance time must have been incredibly short, another disciple remarked, rubbing his chin in thought. Given that he had already defeated New AI, most agreed that reaching the 3rd layer would be a simple formality for him. The hierarchy of the outer sect was shifting, and the heavenly road was just beginning to heat up. Watching the shifting rankings from the sidelines, a red-haired woman narrowed her eyes, her teeth gritting against her thumb in a display of visible agitation. "Bastards," she hissed under her breath. "These 2 guys definitely haven't done less dual cultivation recently." The surge in their power was an irritation she couldn't ignore. Nearby, a shimmering presence drew the eyes of the entire crowd. With a graceful flick of his long blue hair, a man of ethereal beauty stepped into view. Nan Wang, he actually appeared too, someone whispered in awe. As he descended the stairs, the atmosphere grew heavy with his presence. This was the #1 outer sect heavenly pride, a man rumored to be a half-blood celestial. Despite his striking looks, not everyone was impressed. 2 disciples huddled together, their voices dripping with resentment. "He looks quite handsome. He's just too much of a poser," one muttered. The other nodded in agreement, sneering. "Exact. Isn't he just relying on his noble bloodline?" They didn't realize how close he had gotten until the air around them chilled. "Senior brother Nan Wang," one stammered, his face pale as Nan Wang loomed over them. Nan didn't bother with words. In a sudden, violent display of his heritage, his arm underwent a monstrous transformation. His sleeve shredded as his limbs swelled with thick corded muscle and hardened, pale scales, radiating a terrifying azure light. With a brutal, singular motion, he struck. The force of the blows sent the 2 detractors flying, their faces bloodied and their bodies broken before they could even scream. The #1 heavenly pride had no patience for the gossip of the weak. That was harsh. Nan Wang retracted his transformed limb, his expression cooling into one of bored disdain as the 2 disciples lay crumpled in the background. "I hate it most when people gossip behind others' backs," he remarked, his voice carrying a sharp, dangerous edge. He turned his attention toward the red-haired woman who had been watching. Sensing his approach, she didn't flinch, her gaze remaining hard and defensive. "What are you doing here?" she demanded. Nan let out a sharp, mocking laugh, spreading his hands wide with theatrical flair. "I heard the pretty baby boy you're keeping ran off with another woman," he sneered, his eyes gleaming with malice. "I specifically came over to mock." The woman's restraint snapped instantly. A violent aura of purple energy erupted around her, her eyes glowing with murderous intent. "You're courting death," she roared. She lunged forward, her hand wreathed in dark violet flames, aiming a lethal strike directly at. Nan didn't move. He simply watched her approach with a smug, knowing grin. Just as her palm was about to make contact, a massive, calloused hand intercepted her wrist mid-air. The impact let out a sharp crack as her momentum was halted completely. The woman froze, her eyes widening in shock. Towering over both of them was a colossal demonic figure, his body wreathed in golden flames and his eyes glowing like ember. The sheer pressure of his presence forced the air from her lung. "Niuao," she gasped, realizing the scale of the power that had just intervened. The field of play had just become significantly more crowded. A collective gasp rippled through the onlookers as they recognized the mountain of a man who had just intervened. "It's Niuao, ranked 8th on the Inner Sect Heavenly Pride rank," a disciple shouted, his voice trembling. Niuao at the peak of the core formation state. Niuao stood like an immovable monolith, steam huffing from his nostrils as he maintained his iron grip on the woman's wrist. Nan Wang, never one to miss an opportunity for a jab, leaned in with a mocking smirk. "Hee, so you're going to avenge your cousin now. Aren't you afraid Zhao Mu's paramour, that elder's granddaughter, will cause you trouble?" Niuao let out a low, guttural grunt. HMPH. With a display of raw, overwhelming power, Niuao didn't even flinch at the mention of the elder. A small glowing dagger of qi manifested near his hand, but he crushed the very air around it with a flex of his finger. "This time it's senior brother Ling Tian Xiang who instructed me," he declared, his voice like grinding stone. "Do you think I'd be afraid?" Hearing this name, Nan Wang's eyes lit up with renewed amusement. He let out a delighted laugh, placing a hand on his hip. "Ha, it seems I didn't come in vain this time." He looked toward the trial entrance, his gaze sharpening with predatory interest. A small disciple who just entered the outer sect facing a peak core formation expert. How truly interesting. The trio now stood together, a volatile mix of inner and outer sect elites, forming a wall of intimidating power that drew every eye in the vicinity. "Look quickly over here," a voice cried out from the crowd as the tension between the gathered heavenly prides reached a breaking point. All while Zhao Mu remained oblivious inside the trial. Outside, the violet scoreboard shimmered once more, sending a fresh wave of shock through the spectating disciple. Zhao Mu's name shot upward with impossible momentum. "Zhao Mu's rank has already entered the top 200, a disciple cried out, his face contorted in disbelief. "Wait, so fast," another stammered, clutching his head. The speed of the ascent was unheard of for a newcomer. But inside the climbing heaven road, the reason for his rapid climb was clear. On the second layer, Zhao Mu stood on a floating stone platform before a swirling purple portal, the atmosphere thick. Ancient energy. He didn't waste a second. As a massive furred beast wreathed in flames lunged toward him, Zhao Mu countered with overwhelming force. Burning flame palm, he thrust his hand forward, unleashing a vertical pillar of searing crimson kai. The beast was consumed instantly, reduced to nothing more than a fading roar and cinder. As the trial concluded, the familiar prompt appeared. Past the second layer, you can choose one of 3 rewards. 3 items materialized before him, floating in a red ethereal haze: a saber technique scroll, a pouch of origin nurturing pills, and a rectangular jade case. Zhao Mu looked at them with a cold, analytical eye. "Saber techniques are useless to me," he mewed, "and origin nurturing pills are no different from jelly beans to me." He reached out, his fingers closing around the jade case. "Then I'll choose you." As he claimed the reward, the case vanished to reveal a shimmering blade humming with spiritual resonance. It was a second-grade flying sword, white jade glow. The sword hovered near his hand, bathed in a brilliant blue aura. With a flick of his finger, Zhao Mu tested the weapon's weight, his eyes already turning toward the entrance to the 3rd layer. As Zhao Mu climbed the stairs toward the next gateway, the newly acquired white jade glow circled him like a loyal sentinel. He looked at the blade with a hint of dissatisfaction. "This grade is completely inadequate," he muttered to himself, the blue light of the sword reflecting in his dark eye. "I have to find a way to give it away." To a cultivator of his standard, a second-grade weapon was a mere bauble. He reached the summit and stepped through the swirling violet vortex of the next portal. Zhao Mu blinked as his vision cleared. He wasn't facing a single opponent this time. Towering over him was a literal wall of night, a horde of massive draconic beasts and horned demons, their eyes glowing with a murderous crimson light. The sheer scale of the trial was a significant jump from the previous layer. "This is way too many, right?" Despite the overwhelming odds, a confident smile tugged at the corners of his mouth. He began to circulate his internal energy, a vibrant golden aura erupting from his body and bathing the stone floor in a celestial light. No wonder most outer disciples only have the ability to pass the 3rd layer after breaking through to the core formation state, he reasoned, his power condensing into a blinding sphere of heat in his palm. The heat intensified until it rivaled a miniature sun, the ground beneath him cracking from the pressure. "But since I'm here," he whispered, his eyes narrowing as the first beast lunged, "even if I can't pass, I have to test the upper limit of my strength so fast." Before the lead monster could even close its jaws, Zhao Mu vanished in a blur of golden light. He moved with such explosive speed that the beasts were left biting at empty air. The battle for the 3rd layer began with a thunderous clash of light and shadow. Zhao Mu didn't wait to be surrounded. He knew that in a hunt, the one who hesitated became the prey. "Strike first to gain the upper hand," he roared, propelling himself high into the air. His silhouette blocked out the artificial sun of the trial chamber as he brought his hand down with thunderous force. Burning flame palm. A vertical pillar of golden fire erupted upon impact, shattering the stone floor and sending a shockwave that reduced the nearest beast to ash. The debris hadn't even settled before a blue-scaled predator lunged from the smoke, its eyes glowing with a murderous crimson light, but the beast's jaws snapped shut on nothing but air. Zhao Mu moved with the fluidity of a shadow, appearing mid-air once more. "Ha-ha," he laughed, his boot glowing with the same celestial gold as he delivered a devastating kick directly into the open maw of a green-scaled dragon beast. The creature's head was whipped back by the sheer force, its scales cracking under the pressure of his strike. As the dust finally began to clear, Zhao Mu stood amidst the wreck, his clothes slightly singed, but his spirit undeterred. He looked down at his hands, feeling the thrum of power beneath his skin. "I only suffered superficial injuries," he mused, a slow smirk spreading across his face. "Is this the true strength of the Red Yang sacred body?" The trial was far from over, but for the first time, the path ahead felt less like a struggle and more like a conquest. Above, a winged monstrosity with glowing red eyes dove from the shadows, its talons outstretched, while a serpentine dragon snapped its jaws from the side. "HMPH," Zhao Mu grunted, his eyes tracking their movements with predatory precision. He didn't retreat. With a sudden burst of speed, he spun into a low sweep, his body becoming a blur of motion. "Ha!" he shouted, the force of his movement whipping up a gale that knocked back a pack of wolf-like creatures attempting to flank him. He moved with a newfound confidence, his strikes landing with the weight of a falling mountain. Standing tall amidst the swirling dust and the looming shadows of his enemies, Zhao Mu let out a sharp, mocking laugh. "Hee, not bad." The golden aura of the Red Yang sacred body flared with renewed intensity, casting long, flickering shadows against the chamber wall. The beasts hesitated, their primitive instincts warring with the command to kill. As they stared at the radiant human before him, relying on his invincible physical body, maybe there was really a hope of passing. Zhao Mu raised a hand, his palm once again igniting with concentrated celestial heat. As the massive green-scaled dragons prepared for a final, desperate charge, Zhao Mu prepared to meet them head-on, no longer just surviving the trial but dominating. That was intense. Enveloped in a searing vortex of crimson heat, the chamber groaned under the weight of an unrelenting firestorm. Massive pillars of flames swirled like chaotic cyclones, lashing against the stone floor with a fury that would have incinerated any ordinary warrior. Yet amidst the inferno, a lone figure stood defiant. Clad in tattered dark robes, the man gripped twin blades of concentrated fire, his silhouette flickering against the blinding orange glow. With a final explosive surge of energy, he quelled the storm. "I actually really succeeded," he breathed, his voice a mixture of exhaustion and exhilarated disbelief. He stood amidst the dying embers, his body battered and his clothes scorched, but his spirit remained unbroken. A faint, triumphant smile tugged at his lips as he surveyed the aftermath of the trial. That was close. The transformation began almost immediately. A vibrant, verdant aura erupted from his core, wrapping around him like a protective cocoon of life energy. The jagged wounds on his torso and arms began to knit together with supernatural speed. "Under the constant baptism of the Red Yang power, my physical body is not only resistant to beatings, but its recovery ability is also extremely rapid," he noted, feeling the cool rush of healing energy soothe his charred skin. He flexed his hands, watching the last of the red sparks fade into the soothing green light. The intense trial had forged his body into something far more resilient than before. Feeling the surge of renewed strength coursing through his veins, he looked toward the glowing crystalline stairs that led further into the depths of the pagoda. The heat radiating from above was even more intense, yet his gaze was steady. "Perhaps I still have the ability to challenge the fourth layer," he murmured. Upon successfully passing the third layer, a shimmering interface materialized before him, presenting a crucial choice. 3 distinct rewards hovered in midair, bathed in an ethereal violet glow: a lethal-looking battle axe, a thick ancient tome, and a potent cultivation. He paused, resting a hand on his chin in deep thought. He knew the stakes of the climbing heaven road were high. The pills and magical treasures obtained in the climbing heaven road cannot be used inside, he reasoned, his eyes narrowing as he evaluated the floating item. If he wanted to survive the upcoming trials, an immediate boost in raw power or a temporary artifact wouldn't suffice. His gaze settled on the book. "If I want to challenge the fourth layer, I can only choose a new cultivation method." With a firm resolve, he reached out and touched the tome. Violent sparks of purple lightning crackled as the knowledge transferred to him, the sheer power of the technique vibrating through his fingertips. He immediately sat cross-legged on the stone floor, the aura of the new technique swirling around him in misty white plumes. The climbing heaven road has no time limit, he thought, closing his eyes to focus his internal energy. It won't be too late to challenge the fourth layer after mastering this technique. Meanwhile, outside the trial grounds, a crowd of spectators gathered in stunned silence. They stared up at the massive stone ranking board where a new name had just surged up. "This couldn't be a mistake, right?" one onlooker stammered, rubbing his eyes in disbelief. "Are you kidding?" another replied, his voice trembling with awe. The climbing heaven grand array was personally created by the St. Yuan Patriarch, and there hasn't been a single error in 8,000 years. High up on the leaderboard, the name Zhao Mu glowed brightly in the 13th position. The crowd erupted into a flurry of whispers and confused shouts, their eyes wide with shock as they looked at the ranking of the new Zhao Mu. How did this guy do it? The atmosphere outside the trial grounds reached a fever pitch as cultivators marveled at the impossible feat. "What kind of monster is Zhao Mu?" one young man cried out, sweat beading on his forehead. He actually broke through the third layer in just a mere half of a quarter of an hour. A more seasoned cultivator shook his head, his expression grim. The time isn't considered fast, but his cultivation is only at the fifth layer of foundation established. Even an early-stage core formation disciple might not necessarily have such speed, another added, his voice trembling. The discrepancy between Zhao Mu's low cultivation rank and his high-speed performance defied logic. Standing apart from the common crowd, a striking woman with vibrant crimson hair bit her thumb, her eyes burning with a mix of suspicion and envy. What kind of opportunity did this guy Zhao Mu encounter for his strength to improve so terrifying, she wondered, her aura flickering. With a cold blue intensity, her brooding was interrupted by a mocking laugh. A massive hulking figure with demonic horns and thick armor stepped forward, towering over the other disciple. HMPH, a mere outer sect, heavenly pride rank has you all shocked like this, he jeered, his voice booming with arrogance. He crossed his massive arms, looking down at the gathered students with pure disdain. The outer sect is just the outer sect, all a bunch of worthless guys. The crowd fell into a tense, resentful silence, unable to refute the brute's claims. Suddenly, a brilliant violet light erupted from the trial portal, drawing every eye back to the gate. Look quickly. Senior Sister Lucha has come out, someone shouted. A woman emerged from the swirling purple energy, her expression composed and dignified. The crowd erupted into fresh cheers as the updated rankings shimmered into existence. She lasted a quarter of an hour on the fourth layer and is temporarily ranked 9th. She pushed Senior Sister Chu Jiren down to 10th place. The disciples whispered in awe. While Zhao Mu's sudden rise was a mystery, Senior Sister Lucha's exit served as a powerful reminder of the true powerhouses currently dominating the climbing heaven road. A chorus of congratulations rose from the crowd as Senior Sister Lucha fully emerged from the portal. She waved a dismissive hand, her expression one of practiced humility. Heh, it's nothing, she replied smoothly. However, the red-haired woman standing nearby wasn't impressed. A dark, envious aura flickered around her as she scoffed audibly. It's just moving up a few places. What's there to be proud of? Senior Sister Lucha didn't miss the barb. She turned toward the other woman, a sharp, playful glint in her eyes and a confident smile on her face. True, it's only a few places, but it just happens to be slightly better than a certain vixen, she countered, her voice dripping with sweet venom. The red-haired woman, Senior Sister Chu Jiren, let out a sharp HMPH of indignation. Her eyes narrowed as she gestured toward the massive horned man standing beside her. So what if you surpassed me? Inner sect senior brother Niu Ao is he. Can you protect Zhao Mu from him? Niu Ao let out a low mocking chuckle, his presence looming over the court. Watching the exchange, Senior Sister Lucha's smile faded into a look of grim realization. Inner sect Niu Ao. This should be Niu Ai's older cousin, she thought, her gaze hardened. It seems he came because of Niu Ai's matter. Now Zhao Mu is really in trouble. Deep within the trial chamber, oblivious to the brewing storm outside, Zhao Mu was deep in meditation. Violent streaks of violet electricity danced around his body, crackling against the stone floor. His eyes snapped open, glowing with an intense electrified light as he channeled the newly acquired power. Purple lightning entangled. With a sudden explosive motion, he thrust his hand forward. Massive bolts of jagged purple lightning erupted from his palm, weaving together into a devastating web of energy that illuminated the entire room in a blinding violet flash. The third layer reward was proving to be a formidable addition to his arsenal. The violent surge of energy reached its zenith as the lightning struck a massive rock formation, shattering it into jagged fragments with a deafening roar. Purple arcs danced across the debris, illuminating the chamber in a ghostly electric hue. Zhao Mu sat amidst the lingering sparks, his hands still glowing with the residue of the technique. He exhaled slowly, reflecting on the difficulty of the feat. Lightning attribute cultivation methods are indeed harder to practice, he mused. A sense of quiet pride settled in his chest as he assessed his progress. If not for my powerful comprehension, it would be absolutely impossible to grasp the basics within half a day. He stood up, looking down at the scorched floor where the lightning had carved deep, radiating grooves into the stone. The sheer scale of the destruction was impressive. The attack range of purple lightning entanglement is quite large. This move will definitely be useful when fighting multiple enemies at the same time. After a brief moment to stabilize his internal energy, he exhaled a long breath of white mist. Phew, I've rested enough. With his strength restored and a new technique at his disposal, he turned his attention to the winding stone staircase that led toward a swirling violet portal. He began the ascent, his footsteps echoing in the vast silent hall. I wonder what kind of enemy I'll encounter on the fourth layer, he thought, his hand instinctively tightened. As if in answer to his question, a low, guttural growl vibrated through the air. From the shadows of the upper platform, a monstrous creature emerged. It was a massive feline beast with fur as dark as midnight, its eyes glowing with a cold, predatory blue. Wisps of ethereal teal flame flickered from its joints, and a crown of golden fire blazed atop its head and tail. Saliva dripped from its bared fangs as it crouched atop a jagged rock, its powerful claws digging into the stone, ready to tear the interloper apart. Zhao Mu stood frozen for a split second, his breath hitching as he locked eyes with the creature. A cold sweat broke across his brow. Just a single fierce beast brings me such immense pressure, he thought, his heart hammering against his ribs. The aura radiating from the beast was suffocating, far surpassing anything he had faced in the lower layer. Steeling his resolve, he ignited his hands with flickering orange flame. I can only do my best. Before he could even finish the thought, the beast became a blur of dark fur and teal fire. It moved with a velocity that defied the eye. Zhao Mu barely had time to raise his guard before a massive clawed shadow loomed over. What fast speed! He grunted in pain as razor-sharp talons raked across his chest, shredding his robes and leaving deep bloody gashes. Blood sprayed into the air, but he didn't back down. Forcing the pain to the back of his mind, he thrust his palm forward, summoning his internal heat. Burning flame palm. A massive crescent-shaped wave of fire erupted from his hand, sweeping across the stone tiles in a desperate attempt to incinerate the predator. The floor groaned under the heat, but as the smoke cleared, the beast was nowhere to be found. It had vanished into the swirling mist and dust, leaving Zhao Mu standing alone in the center of the arena. He scanned the perimeter, his eyes darting frantic. He could feel the beast's presence, a lingering chill in the air, but its movements were too fluid. It's too fast, I can't hit it at all. Realizing that fire and raw strength wouldn't be enough to pin down such an agile opponent, he dropped into a low crouch. His expression shifted from desperation to a grim, calculated focus. If he couldn't hit the beast directly, he would turn the entire floor into a trap. Let's see if you can still run after being elected. He slammed his hands against the floor. Violent purple lightning exploded from his palms, branching out like a web of jagged glass across the tiles. The purple lightning entanglement surged outward in every direction, filling the chamber with a blinding, crackling light as it sought out the invisible predator. The fourth layer trial reached a brutal climax. Zhao Mu tracked the shadowy beast as it leaped into the air, its movements a blur of teal fire. Caught you, he roared, lunging forward with his right palm ignited. This is my strongest strike. The beast contorted midair with impossible agility, dodging the fiery blow. It can actually change direction in midair. Zhao Mu's eyes widened, but the shock was a feint. As the creature closed in for the kill, he smirked, his left hand crackling with dormant energy. Hee, you fell for it. Purple lightning entanglement is my real strongest strike. You can't dodge from this close. The point-blank electrical discharge slammed into the beast, sending it crashing to the floor in a charred heap. However, the victory was instantaneous and hollow. Zhao Mu gasped as a fountain of blood erupted from the deep gouges in his chest. Ha! The world tilted. His legs buckled and he collapsed to his knees, his vision blurring as he clutched his shredded torso. Hee, is this as far as I go? He thought, a weary smile touching his lips. Beast, you win. Just as the darkness began to take, a crystalline blue interface flickered into existence before his fading eyes. Ding. You were wounded by a demon beast, triggering the 10,000 times return. What? Zhao Mu stammered, his eyes snapping wide. A violent golden radiance erupted from his core, far more blinding than any flame he had previously conjured. The light surged through his veins, stitching his flesh back together and causing his muscles to bulge with newfound power. His skin began to glow with ancient circuit-like markings, and a pillar of soaring celestial fire enveloped his entire frame. Standing tall amidst the golden inferno, his wounds vanished and his presence transformed into something primal and sovereign. A final notification solidified in the air. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the human emperor bloodline. The golden light of the system interface flared, illuminating the youth's wide-eyed shock as the notifications cascaded before him. 10,000 times return. The prompt chimed, followed by the monumental revelation, human emperor bloodline. Beneath the glowing blue text, the history of a forgotten era flickered into existence, manifesting as vivid spectral projections. The images shifted to show a time of absolute despair, where the human race had fallen into a position of pathetic weakness. They were a people driven to the very brink of extinction, hunted like prey across a scorched landscape. A monstrous one-eyed titan with a furnace for a head and a maw filled with jagged teeth loomed over a fleeing crowd of terrified refugees. It was a dark age of subjugation, where humanity was nothing more than fodder for the grotesque beings that ruled the world. However, just as the final spark of hope seemed ready to gutter out, the vision changed. At that critical moment, a group of peerless experts emerged from within the human race. The youth watched in awe as the projection showed these ancient warriors rising to meet their oppressor. Facing the hulking, flame-headed demon and its winged minions, the first human emperors stood their ground. Clad in white robes and radiating a divine golden aura, they channeled the power of their newly awakened bloodlines to strike back against the darkness, turning the tide for a race that had forgotten how to fight. The holographic display pulsed with violent energy as it recounted the legends of old. These ancient pioneers had tempered their physical bodies and bloodlines to the absolute limit, forging themselves into weapons of formidable and invincible combat power. In the vision, a warrior wreathed in golden lightning descended like a meteor, shattering the monstrous one-eyed titan with a single earth-shaking strike. Their strength allowed the human race to finally turn the tide, transforming from helpless prey into a force that struck terror into their enemy. Through their sacrifice and power, they ensured the continued existence of humanity, carving out a future where they were no longer hunted. The youth tightened his fist, his muscles bulging as a resonant heat began to circulate through his veins. The weight of this legacy settled into his bones, sparking a new ferocious ambition. Perhaps one day I too can tread upon the river of stars and eradicate all invading enemies, he declared, his voice steady with conviction. Suddenly, a pillar of crimson and gold energy erupted from his body, tearing through the roof and surging toward the heavens. The sheer pressure of his awakening sent a shockwave across the court, cracking the stone beneath his feet. As the dust settled and the light faded, he stood amidst the debris, the aura of the human emperor bloodline finally beginning to take hold. A smirk played on the youth's lips as he turned his gaze toward the snarling beast before him. "Little leopard," he taunted, his voice cool and brimming with a newfound confidence. "Do you still want to keep playing?" The creature, a massive shadow leopard wreathed in flickering spirit flames, responded with a low, guttural growl that vibrated through the stone floor. Its red eyes burned with predatory rage as it let out a series of sharp, huffing barks before launching into a full-throated, deafening roar. To any other cultivator, the beast's movements would have been a blur of lethal speed, but as it lunged, the youth merely watched with a bored expression. He mused, watching the massive claws sweep toward his head. Looking at it now, it really is too slow. With the fluid ease of a man stepping out of the rain, he vanished. The leopard's strike met nothing but air, its heavy paws shattering the tiles where he had stood a millisecond before. The youth reappeared in a flash of golden light, his hand glowing with the concentrated essence of his awakened blood. Before the beast could even register his movement, he delivered a single open palm strike. The impact was precise and devastating. A sickening crack echoed through the courtyard as the sheer force of the blow tore through the leopard's defenses, splitting the creature's form down the center. Dust and debris swirled in a violent gust as the beast's remains hit the ground. Standing amidst the settling clouds of smoke, the youth exhaled a long, steady breath. He casually adjusted his stance, his expression calm and unshaken as he surveyed the aftermath of his power. "Phew," he sighed. The silence of the courtyard returned as quickly as the violence had erupted. With the trial of the third layer concluded, a shimmering notification appeared in the air before the youth. For his success, he was presented with 3 distinct rewards: a 4th-grade windwalk pill, a 4th-grade artifact known as the Frostfall Spear, and a black-rank mid-grade technique titled Great Severing Cleaving Hand. The 3 items materialized in a golden glow, hovering before him. He stroked his chin thoughtfully, eyeing the floating treasure. "They are all good items," he murmured to himself, "but it's a pity I can only choose one." After a moment of deliberation, he reached out toward the glowing porcelain vial. "Whatever, I'll just casually pick a pill and give it to someone else." With a flick of his finger, he claimed the windwalk pill, his mind already drifting toward the world beyond the trial. It should have become quite lively outside by now, he noted, glancing toward the exit as the swirling mists began to part. He was right. Outside the trial grounds, a crowd of disciples had gathered in a state of absolute frenzy. "Everyone, come take a look," one man shouted, pointing frantically toward the massive stone monument that tracked the achievements of the sect's elite. Zhao Mu's ranking has changed again. Gasps echoed through the courtyard as the glowing text on the purple banner shifted. Zhao Mu has become first place on the outer sect heavenly pride rank. A disciple cried out in disbelief, his eyes wide as he stared at the top of the leaderboard. Among the crowd, a young woman clutched her hands to her chest, her face flushing with a mix of pride and shock. "Zhao Mu, you actually did it," she whispered, her eyes shimmering. Behind her, other disciples were left in a daze, murmuring in hushed, stunned tone. "Number 1 in the outer sect. How is that possible?" A hulking demon with dark horns and a stony gaze watched the rankings with simmering resentment. "To become number 1 in the outer sect at only the 5th layer of Foundation establishment," he growled, his face twisting into a mask of pure malice. "I must use my full strength to obliterate him later." Unaware of the growing target on his back, Zhao Mu stepped through a swirling purple vortex, transitioning into the next stage of the trial. As the portal faded, he found himself standing on a vast tiled arena dwarfed by 5 towering shadows. Before him loomed 5 mid-stage core formation great demons, monstrous entities with glowing red eyes and bodies like iron. 5 mid-stage core formation great demons," Zhao Mu remarked, his voice echoing in the sudden silence of the hall. "Isn't that too exaggerated?" The demons let out a collective bone-chilling roar, their murderous intent manifesting as a crimson fog behind them. Despite the overwhelming odds, Zhao Mu merely raised his hands in a placating gesture, a faint, playful smile tugging at his lips. "There's no need for you big shots to make a move," he said smoothly. "I know my own limits." But the demons were not interested in negotiation. One of the behemoths lunged forward, swinging a massive glowing red polearm with enough force to shatter the heaven. The weapon trailed a wake of destructive energy as it tore through the air toward Zhao Mu's chest. "Hey, big shots, don't be impatient," Zhao Mu teased. The air around him suddenly ignited with a brilliant golden aura. As the massive weapon made contact, it didn't find flesh. Instead, it struck a barrier of blinding light. The demon let out a startled ah as the force of its own blow was met with an immovable wall of energy. The shockwave rippling back through the red spear as the human emperor bloodline surged to life once more. Zhao Mu laughed heartily, the sound echoing through the trial space as he began to dissipate into light. "Wait until I have the strength next time to come challenge you again," he promised the lingering shadows of the great demons. His golden eyes flashed with a sharp calculating glint as he added, I believe it won't be too long. Outside in the sect court, the atmosphere was electric. Disciples suddenly pointed toward the center of the plaza, screaming, Look, Zhao Mu has come out. A pillar of brilliant orange fire erupted from the ground, swirling into a violent vortex before solidifying into a human form. As the flames died down, Zhao Mu stood tall, his hand resting casually on his hip. He surveyed the massive crowd with a smug, knowing grin. So many people, he remarked, his voice carrying over the murmurs of the stunned onlook. Are they all here to welcome? The peaceful moment was shattered instantly. A massive figure descended from the sky like a falling star, slamming into the stone tiles with enough force to send cracks spiderwebbing across the entire court. The impact created a shockwave of red energy that sent nearby disciples stumbling back. The dust cleared to reveal the hulking horned demon from earlier, his massive muscles rippling as he loomed over all. A predatory, jagged grin stretched across his face. Brat, you've finally come out, he growled, his voice thick with malicious intent. I've been waiting for you for a long time. As the dust settled, Zhao Mu found himself flanked by two familiar figures who moved with practiced grace to shield him. Before he could utter a word, a warning hissed from his side. Be careful, the woman in white cautioned, her sword already drawn and glowing with a cold light. He is Niuao, ranked 8th among the inner sect heavenly prides. To her left, the crimson-clad Chu Jiren adjusted her stance, her eyes sharp and focused. You run first, she commanded, her voice steady despite the overwhelming pressure emanating from their opponent. We'll help you hold him off. Zhao Mu blinked in genuine confusion. Ha! A bewildered expression crossed his face. While he understood why Luchai might step forward, the other woman's presence was a mystery. He leaned slightly toward Chu Jiren, whispering, Luchai helping me is one thing, but Chu Jiren, what are you playing at? The woman didn't look back, but a faint, defiant flush crept up her neck as she tapped a golden talisman. HMPH, I naturally have my own reasons, she retorted. Across the courtyard, Niuao's eyes burned with a murderous intensity. He watched the two women with a mix of frustration and calculation. For Chu Jiren and Luchai to protect Zhao Mu so vigorously, it seems the people behind them have noticed his potential, he thought, his muscles tensing. He knew he couldn't wait. I cannot delay. I must kill Zhao Mu before the elders arrive. With a thunderous roar that shook the very foundation of the sect, Niuao lunged into the air. Get lost, he bellowed, his massive fist wreathed in a terrifying, jagged aura of red energy. No one will stop me from avenging my cousin. The sheer force of his descent sent the two women reeling back, leaving Zhao Mu alone in the center of the impact zone. But instead of fleeing, Zhao Mu merely sighed, a calm, almost predatory smile spreading across his face. Heave ho, he muttered, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off a light slumber. Here we go. As the hulking shadow of Niuao eclipsed him, Zhao Mu's own aura flared into a brilliant emerald gold light. He pressed his palms together, his eyes locking onto the descending titan. Then let me experience the strength of the peak of core formation. The clash between the two was instantaneous and earth-shattering. As Niuao's gargantuan fist descended, Zhao Mu met it head-on, his body erupting with the ancient golden power of the human emperor bloodline. The collision sparked a massive explosion of light and pressure that tore through the plaza, creating a blinding dome of energy that sent tremors through the surrounding architecture. The onlookers shielded their eyes, gasping in sheer terror and disbelief. Is this really the strength of the fifth layer of foundation established? One stammered while another cried out, he can actually withstand the peak of core formation head-on. As the radiance intensified, a realization began to dawn on the senior disciple. The radiance on his body, could it be? One started before another finished with a shout of pure shock. He has the human emperor bloodline. The center of the crater, Niuao's eyes widened, his teeth bared in a snarl of exertion. He was a mountain of muscle, yet he found himself completely stalled. To his horror, Zhao Mu was holding back his massive fist with a single glowing hand. If it's a contest of strength, senior brother might not necessarily be my match, Zhao Mu taunted, his voice steady despite the tons of force pressing down on it. What? Niuao roared, his mind racing. Just how many secrets does this brat have? I can't hold back anymore. Gritting his teeth, the hulking demon poured every ounce of his cultivation into his arm, his muscles bulging to the point of tearing. With a desperate ha, he tried to crush the youth beneath, but Zhao Mu merely let out a dismissive HMPH as his golden aura flared even brighter, the power of his bloodline effortlessly matching the demon's peak-level strength. Luchai's heart hammered against her ribs as she watched the stalemate. Seeing the terrifying surge of energy from the inner sect expert, she screamed at the top of her lungs, Zhao Mu, run quickly. Beside her, Chu Jiren's usual composure had fractured, her face pale and beaded with sweat as she realized the sheer scale of the power being unleashed. Niuao, however, wasn't planning on giving his target a chance to breathe. Cruel, triumphant sneer pulled at his lips as a glowing, cruciform mark of sword intent manifested directly over his chest, pulsing with lethal radiance. Die, he bellowed, his voice laced with the arrogance of a predator. Being able to die under this sword intent, your life wasn't lived in vain. The air screamed as the sword intent condensed into a blinding physical force. But as the killing blow launched, Zhao Mu didn't flinch. His long hair whipped wildly in the resulting gale, and his eyes burned with a fierce golden light. The golden dragon of pure energy lunged forward, its jaw unhinged in a silent predatory roar. Zhao Mu recoiled, his eyes wide as the searing heat of the beast's scales radiated against his skin. Across from him, his hulking opponent sneered, certain that this strike would be the end. Bastard. This sword intent is Long Tian Xiang's, Zhao Mu spat, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. He wasn't just fighting a man, he was fighting the borrowed, overwhelming power of a master. The aura pressed down on him, threatening to crush his spirit before the dragon even made contact, but he wouldn't break. That's cheating. Gritting his teeth, Zhao Mu planted his feet, the stone floor beneath him spiderwebbing under the sudden pressure of his stance. A golden light, deeper and more ancient than the dragon before him, began to erupt from his core. Human Emperor bloodline open, he roared. The air screamed as his power surged. Radiant wings of jagged ethereal fire burst from his back, illuminating the dim arena in a blinding flash. He reached out, his hands trembling with the effort of catching a sun, and collided with the dragon's head. Hold on for me, Zhao Mu hissed through a bloody grimace. He poured every ounce of his willpower into his palms, wrestling the massive construct of sword intent. For a heartbeat, the world hung in a precarious balance, man against myth, until the pressure reached its breaking point. The dragon shattered. An enormous explosion of light and debris turned the stage into a crater. Dust choked the air and shards of rock rained down like hail. From the sidelines, the girls watched in horror. One rushed forward, her voice a desperate plea over the ringing in her ear. Zhao Mu. But the other stayed frozen, her face pale as she looked at the settling smoke. It's no use, she whispered, the sheer destructive force of the clash leaving no room for hope. Smoke hung heavy over the shattered arena, a thick, suffocating shroud that masked the aftermath of the explosion. For the red-haired woman watching from the sidelines, the silence was deafening. Her violet eyes narrowed, tracing the swirling dust with a grim calculation. This is the sword intent of a nascent soul cultivator, she thought, her expression hardening. As someone only in the Foundation establishment stage, he has probably been reduced to ashes by now. Pang of frustration flared within her. If he was dead, her mission was dead with him. Damn it. There's no way to complete the task given by Master. Across the ruins, the hulking warrior stood amidst the settling debris, his silhouette imposing against the rising plumes of smoke. He didn't bother to hide his disdain. This is the consequence of blindly offending a big shot. You, the other woman cried out, her voice trembling with a mix of fury and grief as she stared into the gray haze. Suddenly, a wet hacking sound broke the stillness. Cough, cough, cough. The giant warrior stiffened, his head snapping toward the center of the crater. Even the girls froze, their breath catching in their throats. From the heart of the mist, a bloodied figure began to emerge. Zhao Mu's clothes were shredded, his chest stained crimson, but a jagged, defiant grin stretched across his face. He wiped a trail of gore from his chin, his eyes gleaming with a manic sort of triumph. "This that brat Long Tian Xiang's sword intent?" he asked, his voice raspy but steady. He took a step forward, his bare torso heaving as he fought through the pain. He looked at his trembling hands, then back at his stunned opponent. "Seems it's nothing more than this," he mocked, punctuated by another fit of harsh, rattling cough. Cough, cough, cough. Despite the blood in the broken ground beneath him, Zhao Mu stood tall, a living testament that the big shot's power hadn't been enough to put him down. The sight of Zhao Mu standing, bloodied and broken, yet undeniably alive, sent a shockwave through the arena. The dark-haired woman's eyes lit up with a mix of disbelief and sheer relief. "Great," she breathed, a small, hopeful smile breaking through her fear. "How is this possible? You're actually still alive." But the horned warrior's shock quickly curdled into a murderous rage. He saw Zhao Mu's defiance not as a feat of strength, but as a final, pathetic flicker of life, an arrow at the end of its flight. He growled, his hands igniting with a savage orange aura. "Watch me finish you right now." He lunged forward, his massive frame eating up the distance in a single earth-shaking bound. "Stop right there," the woman cried, intercepting him with a blur of speed. She swung her blade, a trail of blue energy following her movement, desperate to shield the wounded Zhao Mu. "Get out of my way," the brute roared, swatting her aside with a surge of overwhelming power that sent her reeling. Nothing was going to stop him from delivering the killing blow. He loomed over Zhao Mu, his fist pulled back like a falling mountain wreathed in destructive energy. "Die." Zhao Mu looked up, the shadow of the fist eclipsing the light. He tried to shift his weight to raise his arms, but his muscles refused to obey. "Damn it, my body has no strength left to move," he thought, the cold reality of his exhaustion setting in as the strike descended. Just as the fist was about to connect, the air itself seemed to fracture. A pillar of intense violet light slammed down from the heavens, erupting between the two combatants with the force of a falling star. The shockwave ground the warrior's momentum to a violent halt, pinning him under a sudden crushing gravity. "Who dares to stop?" the warrior screamed, his face contorting in agony and fury as he struggled against the purple radiance that threatened to drive him into the dirt. "It's me." The voice was cool and melodic, cutting through the chaos of the arena like a blade of ice. High above the fractured stone, a woman descended, draped in a shimmering violet aura that pulsed with terrifying authority. She drifted down with effortless grace, her long purple hair caught in the wind of her own spiritual pressure. As she touched the ground, the pinkish-purple light flared once more before settling. She looked down at the hulking warrior, her expression one of bored indifference. "Do Do you have an objection? She asked soft. The warrior's murderous bravado vanished instantly. The crushing weight of her presence forced him to his knees, his forehead nearly touching the cracked pavement. Disciple wouldn't dare, he stammered, his voice thick with terror. In the back of his mind, a frantic question repeated. Why would Lady Saintess appear here? Around the perimeter, the spectators and guards reacted as one, dropping to their knees in a synchronized wave of reverence. Greetings, Lady Saintess. Their voices echoed across the court. The Saintess ignored the crowd, turning her attention toward the battered Zhao Mu. She crossed her arms, her gaze scanning his blood-streaked form with newfound curiosity. You've certainly made me see you in a new light, she remarked. Zhao Mu leaned back, a faint, weary chuckle escaping his lips. Number one of the outer sect, Heavenly Pride, she continued, her voice clinical yet tinged with genuine intrigue. Although it's not a title worth showing off, with your current cultivation level being able to reach this step, you are the only one in the history of the Saint Yan Demon Sect. Zhao Mu didn't look away, even under the weight of her scrutiny. He let out a breath, the golden glow of his bloodline still faintly flickering around his arm as he offered a humble, if somewhat dry, response. Just a fluke. The Saintess's gaze remained fixed on Zhao Mu, her clinical detachment softening into something more predatory. She extended a hand toward him, her voice low and inviting. Are you willing to take me as your master? Zhao Mu blinked, his brow furrowing as he processed the sudden offer. Before he could utter a word, a booming voice tore through the sky, crackling with raw spiritual energy. I heard an absolute human race Heavenly Pride appeared in the outer sect. Where is he? Let me have a look quick. Red streaks of light cut through the clouds like falling meteors. 3 figures descended with terrifying speed, each riding a different manifestation of their power. One sat cross-legged atop a giant gourd. Another stood firmly on a floating stone seal. The third plummeted downward while balanced on the hilt of a massive glowing broadsword. The air thick with their competitive auras, they began to bicker before their feet even touched the stone. Zhao Xiang, don't even think about fighting me. I haven't taken a disciple in 800 years, waiting for a human race Heavenly Pride, one roared. I don't care, this precious disciple must be mine, another shot back. You old geezer, the third yelled, his voice dripping with mock defiance. You think just because you say not to fight for him I won't, I'm giving you face. Below, the disciples watched the spectacle in awe. Who are these old men? One whispered, only to be hushed immediately. Don't speak carelessly. They are the human race elders of our Saint Yan Demon Sect. The first to land was a man wreathed in a violent purple aura. Saintess, you're being a bit too fast, he said, standing his ground. Our human race has finally produced a peerless prodigy. How can we let your demon race take it? This was Zhao Xiang, the 5th elder of the sect, a legendary array master known for his transcendent attainments in complex seal. Following close behind was a man surrounded by a verdant, flickering flame. Saintess, you've already taken that little monster Wu Jilin, he pointed out with a gruff smile. How about leaving this human race Heavenly Pride to me? This was Fan Dang, the 7th elder. Though his combat strength was not considered the most outstanding among the elders, he was a renowned alchemist whose concoctions were sought after by the entire sect. Zhao Mu stood at the center of the gathering storm, watching as the highest authorities of the sect began to haggle over him like a rare treasure. The heat in the arena intensified as a third figure descended, wreathed in a towering pillar of scarlet flames. Saint Yan Demon Sect's 3rd elder, Dugu Zihan, stood with his arms crossed, a massive blade strapped to his back. His presence was like a furnace, radiating a raw martial pressure that made the very air vibrate. In this cultivation world, strength is the only thing that matters, Dugu Zihan declared, his voice like grinding stone. If you take me as your master, I'll equip you with a full set of artifacts of the 7th grade or higher, and I'll pass on to you my lifelong learning, that battle heaven and earth art. The disciples in the crowd were nearly hyperventilating. Back in the day, this one even relied on this technique to fight his way into the deepest part of the ancient absolute forbidden ground, winning the position of 3rd elder. One whispered frantic. The atmosphere was thick with envy. Good heavens. The sect has a total of 4 human race elders, and 3 have come just like that. Another student remarked, his eyes wide. Just how heaven-defying is this Zhao Mu's apt? Becoming a personal disciple in one step, it's truly enviable. The bids began to fly from all sides as the elders surrounded Zhao Mu, their unique colored auras, green, purple, and red, swirling together. As long as you take me as your master, I'll directly give you my most precious alchemy furnace, Fan Dang promised, his green energy pulsing. Kid, who do you want to choose as your master? Zhao Xiang pressed. Dugu Zihan loomed over him, adding a final stern warning. You have to think carefully. Strength is the most important thing in the cultivation world. Zhao Mu stood at the center of the vortex, a golden light still shimmering around him. He looked at the powerful elders, then at the saintess, a playful, almost mischievous smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. He raised a finger to his chin, appearing to give the matter genuine thought. How about, he started, his eyes twinkling with audacity. I take you all. A deafening silence fell over the arena. The 3 elders froze, their expressions shifting from competitive zeal to utter slack-jawed bewilderment. Even the air seemed to stop moving as they stared at the young man who had just suggested the impossible. Breaking the stunned quiet, the saintess let out a soft, amused hum. A knowing smirk played on her lips as she looked at the baffled men. I have no objections, she said smoothly. It depends on what the 3 elders think. The audacity of Zhao Mu's proposal left the three elders in a state of sheer disbelief. Zhao Xiang rubbed his temples, his face a mask of frustration. Our array master lineage requires spending a massive amount of time learning the profound mysteries of arrays, he countered, shaking his head. Dugu Zihan was even more blunt, his voice booming with the weight of a seasoned warrior. Honing combat abilities requires even more unremitting practical training. Fan Dang joined the chorus of skepticism, pointing a finger for emphasis. If you want to become a master alchemist, it requires a massive amount of time accumulation. You absolutely cannot be distracted. Far from being deterred, Zhao Mu clutched his chest with mock sincerity, a bright golden aura radiating from his body as he looked at the three masters. The three elders value me so highly, how could I let you down? He asked smoothly. How about giving me 3 days to study under each of the three elders respectively? If I can meet the elders' expectations in the shortest time, that will prove I can handle all three simultaneously. The elders fell into a stunned, heavy silence, exchanging uncertain glances. The sheer confidence or perhaps arrogance of the request was unprecedented. The saintess stepped forward, her violet robes fluttering as she reclaimed control of the situation. Hee, then let's settle it like this, she declared, her voice final. She turned to the elders, her aura flaring with a soft, authoritative pink glow. I'm taking this person away. I will do my best to demand an explanation. Many thanks, Lady Saintess, they replied in unison, bowing as she began to float away, her power gently lifting the massive, defeated warrior as she departed. Zhao Mu watched her go, a genuine, appreciative smile crossing his face. This Lady Saintess is quite kind-hearted after all, he thought, feeling a rare moment of gratitude. He waved a hand toward her retreating figure, calling out with newfound energy. In the future, if you need my help with cultivation, this disciple absolutely will not be stingy. The Saintess paused midair, a faint blush creeping onto her cheeks as she bit her thumb, looking back at him with a mix of intrigue and annoyance. We'll talk about this later, she stammered before disappearing into the horizon. As the Saintess vanished, the reality of Zhao Mu's new schedule set in immediately. Zhao Xiang didn't waste a single moment. With a flick of his wrist, a long glowing strand of spiritual energy whipped out, wrapping firmly around Zhao Mu's chest and arms like a binding rope. Stop spouting nonsense, the elder barked, his purple aura surging as he prepared to take flight. Follow this old man to cultivate arrays for. Caught off guard by the sudden restraint, Zhao Mu could only offer a resigned, all right, as he was hoisted into the air. Below them on the decimated courtyard, the dark-haired woman watched her friend being hauled away. A voice pulled her attention back to the immediate danger. Senior Sister Lu Chai, be careful that Long Tian Xiang might plot against you. She looked toward the speaker, her expression hardening into one of resolve. I will be careful, she replied, her eyes lingering on the spot where the confrontation had reached its peak. In the shadows of the crowd, the atmosphere was far less hopeful. The demon cultivator who had originally captured Zhao Mu stood frozen, a cold sweat breaking out across his brow. He watched the streaks of light in the sky, the path of a boy who had gone from a prisoner to the most coveted personal disciple in the sect. In a matter of minutes, he swallowed hard, his throat tight with a growing sense of dread. This kid actually became a personal disciple, he thought, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and pure survival instinct. I'm afraid I won't be able to stay in the Saint Yan Demon Sect anymore. Realizing that his life was now forfeit if his former captive decided to settle old scores, he looked away, already calculating his escape. A heavy weight settled in the young man's chest as he realized the dire straits of his kin. His family remained trapped within the Saint Yan Demon Sect, and with no clear path to escape, the situation appeared increasingly grim. His thoughts shifted to the geopolitical landscape. The Great Xia Dynasty, where Zhao Mu had originally been located, now faced a relentless siege by the neighboring Great Zhao Dynasty. Currently on the verge of total destruction, the Xia Dynasty's fall seemed inevitable. A strategic realization struck. If his family could find a way to intervene and protect the Great Xia Dynasty, it would be equivalent to doing Zhao Mu a favor. Decisive, he resolved to act. Right, I will go find my father to explain this matter right now, he declared. With a surge of crimson energy, he ascended into the air, leaving the ground in a blur of power as his companions watched him depart. A streak of brilliant purple light arced across the sky, descending toward the mist-shrouded peaks of the profound Array Peak. The young man landed softly amidst the floating islands and ancient pagodas, joined by the venerable Elder Zhao. They stood within the heart of Array Valley, a place vibrating with hidden power. Elder Zhao gestured toward the horizon, his voice filled with professional pride. This is Array Valley. A total of 3,271 arrays have been constructed within this entire valley, he explained. He then pointed toward the epicenter of the spiritual energy. Moreover, this is the core of the Saint Yan Demon Sect's mountain-protecting Grand Array. Once the Grand Array is fully activated, this will become the safest place in the Saint Yan Demon Sect. The young man took in the scale of the fortifications, nodding thoughtfully. I see, he murmured. Questions soon occurred to him, and he turned to the elder with curiosity. Was the array on the climbing heaven road also laid out by you, Elder Zhao? The question seemed to catch the old man off guard. He paused, a self-deprecating smile touching his lips as he stroked his long white beard. Although I style myself as an array genius, even if I exhaust my lifelong efforts, I wouldn't be able to create an absolute top-tier array like the Climbing Heaven Road. Elder Zhao's expression turned solemn, his eyes reflecting a deep-seated reverence for the history of their order. The Climbing Heaven Road is an array personally created by the Saint Yuan Patriarch 8,000 years ago. For the Saint Yuan Demon Sect to stand tall in the 10,000 demon forest to this day, the Climbing Heaven Road is the greatest contributor, without a doubt. As he spoke, the image of the ancient patriarch seemed to shimmer in the air, a figure of immense power standing before a massive glowing golden mandala, a testament to a legacy that modern masters could only hope to preserve. The young man gazed toward the distant peaks, his mind racing with the legends of the sect founder. The patriarch is truly amazing, he mused aloud. I heard that 1,000 years after the patriarch founded the Saint Yan Demon Sect, he disappeared. Did he fall? Elder Zhao fell silent, his expression darkening as he stroked his beard. The air between them grew heavy with the weight of unanswered questions. I also do not know the whereabouts of the Saint Yuan Patriarch, the elder finally admitted. Rumor has it that he successfully transcended his tribulation and went to a new world. However, a more chilling vision flickered through the elder's mind, an image of the mighty patriarch bound by heavy glowing chains, multiple swords piercing his back as he remained suspended in a void. Some also say that because he discovered an astonishing secret, Elder Zhao continued, his voice dropping to a near whisper, he was imprisoned by a certain faction and has not been able to break free to this day. A cold sweat broke out on the young man's brow. To suppress a figure as legendary as the Saint Yuan Patriarch, just how terrifying of a faction must that be? Noticing the boy's unease, Elder Zhao waved a hand dismissively, breaking the tension. It is still too early for you to come into contact with these things. Follow me into the cave abode first, and let's test how your array aptitude is. Yes, the young man replied, bowing respectfully before following the elder toward the rocky entrance of a hidden sanctuary. They walked along a stone-paved path that led into the heart of the mountain, arriving at a grand red door entrance tucked within a cavern. As they stepped through the threshold, a pink-haired woman waiting inside turned toward them. Master, she greeted, her voice echoing softly through the stone hall. The pink-haired woman approached with a confident stride, her presence filling the room. How do you have the free time to come to the cave abode today? She asked, her gaze sweeping over the visitor. This was Elder Zhao's disciple, Xing Yureng. As she drew closer, the young man found himself momentarily stunned. His eyes widened, his focus inadvertently snagged by her striking and ample figure. That's wow. He thought, his mind momentarily short-circuited. He quickly blinked, a flush of heat rising to his cheeks as he fought to regain his composure. How embarrassing. I almost lost my composure in front of this senior sister. Elder Zhao, seemingly oblivious to the young man's internal struggle, stepped forward to make the introduction. Yureng, let me introduce you. This is Zhao Mu, your little junior brother. He then turned to the young man. Zhao Mu, this is your senior sister, Xing Yureng. Although her cultivation base isn't high, she is a divine rune prodigy rarely seen in a century. Zhao Mu immediately smoothed his features and offered a respectful bow, clasping his hands together. Zhao Mu greets senior sister Xing. Yureng acknowledged the greeting with a short, her expression unreadable. With the formalities out of the way, Elder Zhao prepared to depart. A golden halo of light began to shimmer above his head, signaling his imminent movement. It just so happens that I have some matters to attend to right now, he announced, the spiritual pressure in the room shifting as he activated his technique. So, let her take you through the basic introduction of an array master first. Follow me, Yureng commanded, her tone curt as she turned and led the way deeper into the sanctuary. Zhao Mu offered a quick okay and trailed behind her, his eyes focused on the task at hand. They stopped before a stone altar where a flickering orange flame danced atop a basin. Yureng reached toward the fire, her fingers expertly coaxing a small circular object to rise from the heat. It floated within a plume of spiritual flame, glowing with a dull ancient light. Senior sister, what is this? Zhao Mu asked, leaning in to inspect the artifact as it hovered before him. A divine rune disc, she explained calmly. Hold it and place it between your eyebrows. As Zhao Mu reached out to take the disc, she added a final instruction. Do not look with your eyes, feel it with your heart. Zhao Mu closed his eyes and pressed the cool metal of the disc against his forehead. Instantly, the world around him vanished. Golden spiritual energy erupted, weaving intricate, glowing chains of runes across his vision. He felt himself suspended at the center of a massive radiant mandala that pulsed with the fundamental laws of the world. The sheer scale of the information was overwhelming, a sea of ancient knowledge manifesting as light. All right, that's enough. Yureng's voice suddenly broke through the trance. The golden vision shattered, and Zhao Mu found himself back in the cave, blinking as the orange glow of the divine rune disc returned to Yureng's hand. He looked slightly dazed, the resonance of the runes still echoing in his mind. Yureng lowered the divine rune disc, her expression unreadable as she watched the young man recover. Tell me, did you see anything just now? She asked, her voice steady. Zhao Mu took a moment to collect his thoughts. The vivid imagery still burned into his mind. I saw a large disc, he began, with peculiar symbols on it. Yureng's eyes sharpened at his description. She crossed her arms, her gaze growing more intense as she processed his words. To be able to visualize the divine rune disc so quickly, this little guy really does have some talent. No wonder Master brought him back personal. Tell me again, how many symbols did you see? She pressed, her skepticism warring with a growing sense of astonishment. Zhao Mu rubbed his chin, looking somewhat sheep. I forgot to count carefully. He paused, trying to estimate the sheer density of the light he had witnessed. About 1,000 or so, maybe a bit more, but definitely not exceeding 2,000. Yureng's composure shattered. What? She shrieked, her eyes wide with genuine shock. Her mind raced as she compared his experience to her own. He saw over 1,000 divine runes on his first visualization. When I did it for the first time, I only saw a few dozen. Zhao Mu, startled by her sudden outburst, pointed toward the disc. Are those symbols divine runes? Reclaiming a bit of her dignity, Yureng raised a finger to emphasize her point, her tone turning instructional. That's right, all. Things in heaven and earth have their order of operation, and the power that maintains this order is the divine runes hidden in the dark recesses of space. Xing Yureng gestured to the air, her voice carrying a weight of ancient wisdom. Divine runes are everywhere and have myriad variations, she lectured. No one knows exactly how many kinds of divine runes exist between heaven and earth. I've studied array art since childhood. It's been over 30 years now, and my array realm has reached the 6th grade. Yet I have only mastered over 6,700 divine rune variations. Zhao Mu looked at her, his hand on his chin in deep thought. There are actually that many of these mysterious symbols. Then is my aptitude for becoming an array master really bad? Yureng twitched, her frustration simmering just beneath the surface as she glared at him. Bastard. Is this guy here to show off? She thought, her teeth gritted in annoyance at his unintentional arrogance. Shaking off her irritation, she regained her focus. Never mind. Since you can already visualize divine runes, let's begin the next step of the teaching. She held up the glowing divine rune disc once more, the orange flames licking at the air. Aha, Zhao Mu chirped, leaning in with genuine interest. Watch closely, she commanded. She channeled her spiritual energy into the disc, causing brilliant golden light to erupt from its center. In an instant, the stone walls of the cave dissolved, replaced by a vast shimmering blue expanse. Zhao Mu looked around in wonder as the world shifted around. Is this an illusion array? You could understand it that way, Yureng replied, her tone a mix of professional pride and lingering annoyance. With a wave of her hand, the environment began to warp further. Pillars of ice rose from the ground while roaring flames and crackling lightning manifested in the air. My current strength, I can also change the structure of divine runes through the divine rune disc to mimic some scene. The strain of the demonstration suddenly took its toll. Yureng's face went pale, and with a soft gasp of her knees buckled. Seeing her stagger, Zhao Mu instinctively reached out, catching her before she hit the ground. His hands inadvertently landed against her chest to steady her, a moment of awkward contact that left him flushing bright red. Senior sister, are you all right? He stammered, his heart racing as he helped her remain upright. Huff, I'm fine, she panted, leaning into him for a brief moment of support. Manipulating divine runes still consumes a massive amount of spiritual power. Gently but firmly, she placed a hand on his chest and pushed herself away. No need to help me up, I'm already fine. Oh, okay, Zhao Mu replied, stepping back and trying to ignore the lingering heat in his face. Yureng walked over to the altar, her expression turning somber as she looked at her hands. This happens because although I have quite the attainment in arrays, I unfortunately lack aptitude in cultivation. To this day, I am still stuck at the peak of the foundation establishment. Zhao Mu tilted his head, puzzled. Breaking through to the core formation realm shouldn't be hard, right? Doesn't the 5th grade Chuan Yuan pill help cultivators form their core? Yureng sighed, a trace of bitterness in her voice. I've even tried the 6th grade Chuan pill, but it's already ineffective on me. Master said that my purple mansion is innately damaged and my core veins cannot gather together. She looked down at herself, her frustration evident. Unless I can get my hands on an 8th grade origin gathering pill, I have no hope of breaking through to core formation. A knowing smirk tugged at the corners of Zhao Mu's mouth. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, a glint of mischief and confidence in his eyes. Senior sister Yureng, he called out, waving his hand to get her attention as she looked back at him in confusion. If I say that I can help you get an origin gathering pill, he leaned in closer, his voice dropping to a low, playful tone that made her breath hitch. How do you plan to repay me? The desperate plea hung heavy in the air. Senior sister Xing clutched at the man's dark robes, her expression a mix of frantic hope and raw vulnerability. If you can get me an 8th grade origin gathering pill, no matter how much it costs, I'll do whatever it takes to scrape the money together. The man looked down at her, his expression unreadable, a faint smirk playing on his lips. He gently but firmly pushed her back, breaking the proximity. Senior sister Xing should also understand, he said, his voice calm and almost teasing, that an 8th grade origin gathering pill isn't something you can just buy with money. Xing froze, her eyes widening as the reality of her situation set in. Money was a finite resource, but the pill she sought was a rarity that transcended simple currency. She looked up at him, her face flushing a deep crimson, her resolve hardening even as her heart raced. If that's still not enough, she took a shaky breath, her gaze dropping for a moment before she looked him dead in the eye. I'll sell myself to you. The air seemed to crackle between them. Before she could even process the weight of her own words, the man's hand shot out, clasping hers in a firm, decisive grip. Great, it's a deal, he exclaimed, his tone shifting instantly to one of cheerful triumph. Xing blinked, the sudden enthusiasm catching her completely off guard as he smiled broadly, holding her hands in a celebratory gesture. The initial rush of desperation began to recede, replaced by a cold, nagging realization. She stared at him, her brow furrowing in confusion and a growing sense of unease. Why do I feel like I've been tricked, she thought, the silence of the room suddenly feeling much louder than before. The man reached into his sleeve, his movements fluid and casual. It just so happens I have a few origin gathering pills here, he said, extending his hand toward her. 2 small green spheres rested in his palm. I'll give them to senior sister first. Senior sister Xing stared at the pills, her expression flat. She didn't reach for them. They are all 5th grade origin gathering pills, she noted with a sigh of disappointment. They no longer have any effect on me. She looked at him, her gaze softening slightly with a hint of pity for his perceived ignorance. But still, thank you for the thought, junior brother. A low knowing chuckle escaped the man's throat. Hee. Internally, a complex system interface flickered to life before his eyes, glowing with holographic precision. Notifications pinged in rapid succession. A 5th grade pill had triggered a 50 times return, obtained a 5th grade heart nurturing pill. Another had triggered a 200 times return, obtained a 6th grade heart nurturing pill. And another had triggered 3,000 times return, obtained an 8th grade origin gathering pill. Haha, here it comes, he thought, his pulse quickening with secret triumph as he pulled a small, ornate porcelain bottle from his robe. Predator's glint flashed in his eyes. He watched her closely, a confident smirk stretching across his face. It seems senior sister Xing won't be able to escape the palm of my hand either. Suddenly, the ground beneath them groaned. A violent tremor rippled through the earth, sending a thunderous rumble echoing across the landscape. The very air seemed to vibrate with a sudden, overwhelming pressure. What's going on? The man asked, his playful demeanor vanishing as he braced himself against the shaking ground. Xing looked up at the sky, her face pale with realization. It's the mountain-protecting Grand Array, she cried out, the massive defensive formation of the sect activating with a terrifying intensity. A sharp rhythmic clicking sound echoed through the air as 3 disciples materialized from thin air. They landed in unison, their hands clasped in a respectful salute. Greetings, senior sister Xing, they shouted, their voices projecting a disciplined strength. Xing stood her ground, her arms crossed firmly over her chest as she looked down at the scouts. Her initial panic had shifted into a professional, authoritative frostiness. Have you found out the reason for the array's damage? She demanded. One of the disciples stepped forward, keeping his head bowed in deference. Reporting to senior sister Xing, it has been found that the 3 damaged points of the mountain protecting Grand Array were caused by evil beasts. He paused, his expression darkening with concern, but there were also faint fluctuations of evil Kai left at the scene. We have reported the situation to the core Holy Land, and the Holy Sun has stated he will personally investigate this matter. Xing's expression remained stoic, though a flicker of recognition crossed her eyes. At the mention of the Holy Sun, beside her, the man watched the exchange with silent interest. Thank you for your hard work, Xing said dismissively. Go back and rest. Yes, the disciples responded. A golden light erupted beneath their feet, a shimmering teleportation circle that swallowed them whole and whisked them away from the courtyard. As the light faded, the man turned to Xing, his curiosity finally piqued by the formal interruption. Did something happen? Xing began to walk away, her long pink hair swaying with each step. Her voice was flat, carrying the weariness of someone accustomed to such chaos. It's nothing more than demons and evil spirits making trouble, she replied, not looking back. This is a common occurrence in the St. Yan Demon Sect. The man followed behind her, his brow furrowed in genuine confusion. The St. Yan Demon Sect is also an evil path faction, he countered, his voice reflecting his bewilderment. How are there still evil spirits causing trouble in their own camp? Senior sister Xing slowed her pace, her gaze turning distant as she began to explain the complex geopolitics of their world. The Xunwu continent has been divided into the human race and demon race factions since ancient times, both hating each other, she said, her voice tinged with a solemn weight. In such an environment, the situation of our St. Yan Demon Sect is actually quite awkward. She stopped near a tranquil pond in the court, the serene water contrasting with the grim reality of her words. We neither have the recognition of the demon race, nor can we gain the trust of the human race. Who knows how many people view the St. Yan Demon Sect as a thorn in their side? The man fell silent, his hand going to his chin as he processed. It was a precarious existence caught between 2 warring monoliths who both viewed them with hostility. I see, he murmured to himself. It seems that if the human race and demon race could coexist peacefully in the St. Yan Demon Sect, that would be the strange thing. Xing turned toward the stairs of the nearby pavilion, the exhaustion from the day finally catching up to her. The exhaustion was too great just now, she admitted, her tone softening. I'll go upstairs to rest a bit before I continue teaching you. No problem, the man replied, watching her ascend. She paused on the wooden steps, looking back over her shoulder with a sharp warning glance. You can wander around downstairs as you please, but you are not allowed to go upstairs. The man watched senior sister Xing disappear upstairs, a confident knowing smile playing on his lip. He toyed with the small green bottle in his hand, his eyes glinting with mischief. In a bit, I'm afraid senior sister will be begging me to go up, he murmured to himself, his voice thick with self-assurance. He turned toward the center of the courtyard, stretching his arms high above his head as a wave of fatigue finally hit him. Forget it. It's just as well that I take a rest first too. With practiced ease, he shed his dark outer robes, leaving them in a heap upon the stone tile. He stepped into the steaming azure waters of the private spring, the heat instantly soothing his tired muscle. He leaned back against the smooth rocks, a sigh of pure contentment escaping. The disciples of the Saint Yen Demon Sect really know how to enjoy themselves, he mused, looking around the lush court. Everyone has a hot spring in their court, that's the life. But even in relaxation, his mind remained sharp. He raised a hand, tapping the air to summon his glowing blue system interface once more. Check, he commanded softly. The holographic screen flickered to life, displaying his current resource. His brow furrowed as he scanned the data. I still have 7 million spirit stones on hand, but it's far from enough for my cultivation. The numbers were staggering to any ordinary person, yet to him, they were a mere pittance. Just to break through to the 6th layer of foundation establishment, I still need another 100 million spirit stone. The political landscape of the sect was as treacherous as the path of cultivation itself. With the 3 great elders and the saintess backing me up, Long Tianxiang shouldn't dare to make a move against me openly, he reasoned, a cold smirk touching his lips. But he might still use dirty tricks behind my back. The man stood in the shimmering turquoise water, his fist clenched tight as resolve hardened in his eyes. I must become stronger, he declared to the empty court. He cast a sidelong glance toward the upper floor of the pavilion, a predatory smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. I'll start with you, senior sister. Emerging from the spring, he ignored her previous warning and moved toward the stair. As his bare foot touched the first wooden step, a golden light flared with a sharp hum. The defensive array reacted instantly, manifesting a ring of ethereal glowing swords and heavy maces that hovered menacingly around him. Their blades pointed directly at his chest and throat. What are you trying to do? Sheng's voice drifted down from above, cold and filled with suspicion. The man froze, his hands raised in a mock gesture of innocence. He forced a sheepish, slightly nervous grin onto his face, sweat beading on his forehead as the spiritual weapons pulsed with lethal energy. I was just curious what upstairs could emit such a wonderful fragrance, he stammered, his eyes darting between the sharp blades. Please don't blame me, senior sister. Upstairs, Xing stood amidst the rising steam of her own bath. She glanced over her shoulder, her expression unimpressed and her eyes narrowed in a sharp, knowing look. Do you think I don't know what you're thinking? She countered, her voice cutting through his flimsy excuse with ease. Xing remained submerged in a steaming bath, her expression cool and unimpressed. But you can't come up anyway, she stated, her voice carrying a note of absolute certainty. I've already set up layers of arrays upstairs long ago. Even if a nascent soul powerhouse tries to force their way in, they would suffer quite a bit. Downstairs, the man didn't seem deterred by the threat of spiritual defenses. A playful, knowing smile spread across his face as he reached for the small jade bottle he had been carrying. Senior sister, you're mistaken, he said softly, his voice full of confidence. I feel like I can go upstairs and sit for a bit. And it will even be you personally inviting me upstairs, senior sister. He tilted the bottle and a single shimmering golden pill tumbled into his palm. It radiated a pure concentrated energy that seemed to vibrate through the air. The effect was instantaneous. Upstairs, Xing's eyes widened as she sensed the sudden surge of high-grade spiritual frequency. Without a second thought, she vaulted out of the bath, hastily wrapping herself in a white towel. She descended from the upper floor like a pink blur, her movements frantic and lacking her usual composure. She landed in the courtyard before him, her breath hitching as she stared at the object in his hand. The air between them crackled with the sheer quality of the medicine. An 8th-grade origin-gathering pill, she gasped, her voice trembling with a mix of shock and desperation. She reached out, her fingers trembling as she grabbed his arm to get a closer look. Where did you get that? Quickly, let me see.